It all begins with the influential Asteri family, who possess an incredibly imposing presence. They are so powerful that they can even sway the decisions of the emperor himself. This prestigious lineage of mages is known for casting out any member who shows no talent. In the hallways of the mansion, the servants begin whispering about a rather intriguing rumor. One of the maids says that the young master has failed to awaken his mana for the third time. They fear the second master will take over leadership while someone sneaks past in the background. The maids keep saying that he completely lost his mind after failing so many times in a row. The butler appears, wanting to know what the young master has been up to lately. The maid explains that it all started a month ago when he finally woke up from a long coma. Right after waking up, the young man started talking about completely nonsensical and confusing things. Without giving any explanation to anyone, he simply ran barefoot through the mansion in the middle of the rain. He began digging the dirt with his bare hands in a desperate way. He dug so much that his hands were bruised until he found something surprising in the mud. To everyone's surprise, what he raised victoriously with an insane look was just a weed. Given the level of madness, this one must be the Prota. The butler and the maids are in absolute shock, completely losing it over that obsession with wild grass. The butler tries to calm them down, saying that it was rare, but they say the problem is something else. The big problem is that he does the exact same thing every single day for a month. He spends all his time gathering plants in the garden. While the Prota gathers his herbs, notifications of special items obtained pop up. Lion celebrates another productive day, accumulating several units of a blue plant. He dusts off his hands to clean the dirt and begins to reflect on his current situation. The young man realizes he is being closely watched and finds it exhausting to be the firstborn of that family. His current name is Lion Asteri, but in reality, he used to be a Korean guy named Baek Yi-hyun. In his past life, he was a team leader who quit because he couldn't stand his boss's arrogance with a lot of free time after quitting. He decided to log into a nostalgic game from his youth. Upon opening the game, he was furious to realize that all his old characters had been deleted. Since he had no choice, he created a new character and bought an incredible skill package. He decided to adopt a peaceful playstyle to relax without having to worry about combat. This sweet and tranquil memory ended up being his last living record as a human on Earth. When he finally regained consciousness, he realized he had reincarnated into the future of the game itself. Luckily, he inherited the original body's memories, which helped a lot with his adaptation. He has just unlocked a new herbalist achievement and earned some coins for the feat. A message warns that an exclusive shop will be unlocked as soon as he saves up enough money. Lion calculates that if he keeps working hard, he will be able to escape that place sooner than expected. He is grateful that his skills purchased in the game are working perfectly there. Next, he goes back to thinking about the fact that this body failed 3 times to awaken. Being a merit-based family, he knows he will be kicked out and will need coins to survive. He runs through the hallways, planning a way to save coins and escape from there safely. Upon reaching a more remote part of the forest, he crouches down to observe something on the ground. He even considers the funny idea of bribing the head of the family with one of his plants. Suddenly, he notices a mysterious blue glow emanating from inside a nearby bush. Thrilled by the possibility of it being something highly valuable, he quickly runs toward the glow and then manages to pluck the herb. The system reveals that he has just gathered a highly valuable and incredibly rare 3-star plant. Lion gets extremely happy with the new achievement until a voice suddenly calls out to him from behind. He was so thrilled about the 3 stars that he barely paid attention to the person approaching. He then notices that someone was calling him. He recognizes the lady as Sylvia, and she comments on his recent obsession with gathering plants. He says he has his reasons and decides to ask if she can see the plant he is holding. She only says it looks like a high-quality herb, but he insists that it is glowing. Given the young man's insistence, the lady begins to believe the rumors that he has truly lost his mind. Sylvia gently says that she doesn't see any glow at all. With that, Lion has absolute certainty that only he can see the magical aura of that herb. The lady asks them to return to the mansion, warning that the head of the family wants to see him immediately. The young man gulps and gets extremely tense, knowing that his feared grandfather is looking for him. He remembers that his grandfather is a ruthless man who rules the family based on merit and the law of the jungle. Despite the fear, Lion sees the patriarch as the perfect target to build rapport and buy time before escaping. He worries quite a bit because Patrick Asteri called him before he could even prepare a decent bribe. But suddenly a great idea pops into his mind, and he seems to find a solution to his dilemma. He then asks the head maid to let his grandfather know that he will see him a bit later because he has something to do, and reveals that he needs to ask a very important favor of her. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, the patriarch listens intently to the reports from his loyal assistant. He burns a piece of paper in irritation upon hearing that his grandson has done nothing but gather wild grass since waking up from the coma. The assistant adds that the boy still has no mana, but his physical health and memory are excellent. Patrick lets out a sigh of pure frustration upon realizing that his eldest grandson still has no magical talent. Lacking the patience to continue that conversation, the patriarch sharply orders the employee to leave the room. As soon as the door closes, the head maid Sylvia mysteriously emerges from the shadows to speak with her master. The man asks her directly if she has any idea what the boy has been up to in the mansion's garden. She calmly confirms that he is just gathering herbs, making the old man furious. She explains that his harvesting extended into the forest, but the patriarch says that was not what he wanted to know. The headmaid says that the young man sent word that he will only see him later, making the old man even more furious. He slams his fist on the table with utter indignation that a mere incompetent dares to keep him waiting amidst flames of fury. He yells that he will destroy the entire forest. If the boy does not show up immediately, Sylvia agrees to deliver the message exactly as he requested and begins to take her leave. Grumbling about his grandson's lack of manners, the old man reaches out his hand to activate a glowing magic orb. Through the orb, he observes Lion plucking plants and complains that his grandson should have come to thank him first. Meanwhile, Lion enters a secret laboratory and is dazzled by what he finds inside. He observes the table filled with glowing top-tier alchemy equipment for making potions. The boy realizes how extremely expensive those instruments are and praises the wealth of his new family. He strikes a reflective pose and decides to test a theory to see if his gamer instincts are correct. Looking at his skill screen, he deduces that making potions also requires repetitive and focused training. He recalls that the mastery level starts at apprentice and goes up until it reaches the top tier of experts. The young man knows very well that proficiency considerably improves the creation process and the final quality. To start simple, he decides he will craft 100 basic potions and drink them all by himself. With the ingredients properly selected, he extends his hand over the cauldron next. Lion activates his extraction magic skill. The reddish liquid fills the glass vial, and the system confirms that he has successfully created a potion. He celebrates the first positive result while reading the healing properties described in the item window. Impressed by the ease, he gulps down the potion all at once and praises the incredible borrowed equipment. His health bar begins to rise, and the system starts the progress of his achievement to become an alchemist. He laughs victoriously upon confirming his theory and mentally prepares to face the rest of the great challenge. With a wild smile, he laughs out loud, imagining how he will achieve his goals soon. He spends the next few hours producing and drinking dozens of vials to reach the goal set by the game. However, fatigue and a full stomach begin to take their toll, leaving the young man completely exhausted. Sitting on a chair with vials scattered across the floor, he feels like he cannot take another single sip of that. Since his health has already reached maximum capacity, continuing to swallow the drink becomes actual physical torture. Even though he can't take it anymore, he forces himself to swallow the last drops of the final vial right after. The system announces that the new achievement has been unlocked and that he has reached apprentice level 4. Extremely satisfied with the rewards received, he turns to check all the details of the new recipe. With his heart pounding from pure excitement, the boy clenches his fists and prepares to take the next step. He throws the collected leaves into the cauldron to begin the creation process of a much more powerful formula. He reveals that he spent the whole time harvesting thinking about what the ideal gift would be to please his grandfather. Since the patriarch is already overflowing with mana and has doctors on standby, giving healing or energy potions would be pointless, so he concludes that the best choice would be a special potion capable of completely curing mental fatigue. The young man knows very well that the elderly man lives buried under piles of exhausting work, every day without rest. Great mages can use their own energy to restore their physical bodies, so bodily fatigue does not affect them, but stress and mental exhaustion are completely different problems that ordinary magic cannot cure. Sensing the refreshing aroma rising from the cauldron, he notices that the new recipe is coming out exactly as described. He remembers that, in the old video game, this type of potion was considered nothing but junk with no commercial value. But now that he is living in the reality of a fantasy world, everything gains a completely different importance. Right after, he activates his extraction magic to finalize the alchemy and bottle the product. Moments later, his potion was finally made. A few floating bubbles bring brief reflections and nostalgic memories of his old daily life in Korea. The blue vial materializes, and the system warns that the potion works by bringing back the happiest memories of whoever drinks it. He is shocked to see that he managed to create a high-level 2-star item and celebrates having the perfect bribe. Just catching the gentle scent was enough to clear his mind instantly, before he even took the first sip of the liquid. A new notification praises the feat, saying that the formula should be impossible for his current magic level. In that exact instant, the potential to form a magic circle is unlocked, and a special talent activates in his body. Looks like the cheat code finally appeared. The message warns that he is now capable of regulating magic energy with an accuracy absurdly superior to others. An aura of magic begins to circulate around him. Next, it fills his entire body, finally releasing all his potential. Lion gets very excited, experiencing the sensation of finally having mana. He gets excited and starts laughing like a maniac. On the outside, someone was listening to all that madness. It was his brother who observed him laughing like a maniac. He must think he's crazy. He finds it bizarre to see the heir of the family acting that way, and then he simply walks away from there. Comfortably seated, he celebrates the success of the plan and thinks that now it will be much easier to manage his escape right after. He finally begins to relax. But the peaceful moment lasts very little, because suddenly he feels like he ended up forgetting a very important detail. He finally remembers his appointment with his grandfather. The feared patriarch awaited him in the main room of the Asteri mansion. Meanwhile, in another location, the tense atmosphere increases every second because of the young man's delay. Looking out the window, the old man lets out a tired sigh, not understanding why his grandson is trying so hard for a potion. Patrick proudly recalls his glorious youth as a legendary warrior and a member of the great heroes party. He is the imposing leader who possesses enough prestige and resources to found an entire nation if he so desired. The patriarch grumbles that he could provide an easy life for his grandson and does not understand why such a fragile body tries to exert itself. Sylvia comments that it is perfectly normal for him to feel worried about the boy. The elderly man tries to cover it up, pretending he is not worried, but Sylvia reveals that she saw the young man smiling with a genuine and contagious joy while working in the laboratory. The patriarch replies that happiness is of no use when the final destiny seems to be the end of it all, because the boy suffered 3 severe mana shocks, and surviving just one is already a miracle, and states that he only wishes for his grandson to live his remaining days in peace and good health. Someone then knocks on the door, interrupting their conversation. The assistant finally announces the arrival of the heir, who enters the room looking a bit awkward for being late with all the necessary politeness. Lion makes an elegant bow and offers sincere apologies to his grandfather for the terrible delay. Patrick glares at him with a stern look and coldly asks why he took so long to come pay a visit. The young man stands his ground and calmly explains that he had a lot to reflect on after going through that terrible incident. He mentions that everyone in the mansion knows he never had the slightest sign of talent for using magic, leaving Sylvia worried. With a welcoming smile, he reassures the elderly woman, saying he is aware of his own reality and does not care anymore. The young man looks at his own hands and confesses that deep down, he always had a lot of trouble accepting this weakness. He reveals that he was afraid to accept this truth because he felt he would lose his rightful place in the family. Lion places the potion on the table, saying that things have changed now that he has finally accepted his own identity. He explains that he applied himself in his studies to become someone worthy of making the prestigious Asteri name proud. With a tender smile, the boy says he prepared that special gift, keeping his grandfather's recent fatigue in mind. Patrick glares at him with surprise and suspicion while trying to understand what that mysterious liquid really is. The patriarch notices there is something deeply different about his grandson, as if his very essence had changed. Looking at the vial, the old man realizes that the boy spent all this time working hard just to help him. Patrick's heart completely softens, and his eyes even fill with tears in the face of such consideration. But he quickly tries to regain his proud composure, remembering that he has already reached the level of a transcendent warrior. He knows his body is immune to poisons and ordinary potions, but feels awkward hearing his grandson reaffirm his affection. Hearing that the potion was made with all of his grandson's love, the old man turns red from so much contained happiness. Trying to sound cold, he clears his throat and asks the boy if he is already done with everything he had to say there. The old man authorizes the departure of the young master, who says goodbye, making a very polite bow before leaving. As soon as the young man steps through the door and closes it gently, a comfortable silence returns to that grand library. Sylvia doesn't miss the chance to tease her master, saying he looks very happy, though he shyly denies it. Right after, he turns his full attention back to the blue vial and begins to analyze it with quite a bit of curiosity. Holding the glowing glass in his hand, Patrick feels an energy that seems strangely familiar and cozy to him. Sylvia notes that the potion does not smell of mana and suggests a detailed magical analysis, but the old man refuses the advice. The patriarch says he prefers to just enjoy and appreciate with all his heart the sincerity of his grandson's gift. The headmaid accepts the decision and states that she will also withdraw from the room to leave him completely alone with the gift alone. He looks at the vial and tries to recall how long it has been since he received a warm gift from his grandson. He praises the incredible quality of the vial and notices that it required very advanced technical knowledge of alchemy. He unblocks the glass, thinking that it won't have a major effect on him, but decides to drink it so as not to waste the gift. Patrick puts the vial to his lips and swallows the glowing blue liquid all at once to test its properties. Right after swallowing the potion, a light magical breeze begins to blow through the room and wraps the old man's body gently. He leans his back against the chair as he feels an indescribable wave of peace and tranquility clear his entire mind. Old and happy memories of his glorious past begin to appear before his eyes like a beautiful nostalgic movie. Without realizing time passing, the powerful warrior ends up falling into an incredibly relaxing and deep sleep. The dream he has that afternoon ends up being one of the sweetest and most comforting experiences of his entire life. Moments later, he opens his eyes slowly, feeling a renewed vitality that he hadn't experienced in a long time. He is shocked to have fallen asleep, but notices with joy that he doesn't feel groggy or melancholy at all after waking up. Observing the empty vial, the old man notes with impression that the chronic headache that plagued him is gone for good. He looks at the clear sky through the window and feels a lightness of spirit that seemed impossible to achieve before. With a genuine smile on his face, Patrick whispers that his insolent grandson really does whatever he pleases. He reflects that he cannot hold the boy back for being weak and decides he will find a way to heal his mana shocks. The patriarch wishes to live a long time by his side, while Lion feels his eyes tear up with gratitude without understanding why. Far from there, in the mansion's courtyard, a group of employees gossips in fear about the rumor that Lion might be close to the end. A maid spreads the rumor that the potion given to the grandfather was a farewell gift and that he is fading away. One of the staff members laughs out loud and jokes in a malicious way, saying the young man was digging the garden to find his grave. Suddenly, a loud bang startles the young man and interrupts his inappropriate laughter in the middle of the outer courtyard. Realizing Sylvia's intimidating presence, the maids make hurried excuses and flee from there in fear. The young man asks if the red-haired maid is all right, and she reveals furiously that another servant decided to hand in their resignation. The man is surprised, and the young woman complains that the old employees used to brag about having such an easy job. She gets upset because it only took a few false rumors to pop up for everyone to cowardly run away without giving explanations. Hannah says they are ungrateful for the affection Lion always showed, until her friend points behind her in fear. The redhead freezes in terror as she turns around and comes face to face with the severe headmaid glaring at her with an enigmatic expression. With a very calm and terrifying smile, Sylvia says she would also love to hear the full story about these rumors. A luxurious carriage arrives at the main gate of a grand castle under an incredibly bright blue sky. Back in the library, the patriarch asks the head maid if any urgent, unexpected event occurred during her absence. She lies, saying it was just a personal matter, while the gossiping servants are seen being kicked out of the mansion. The patriarch remains in complete silence while processing what he has just discovered about that formula. He asks her to use the special witch's eye skill to analyze the remains of the vial left by his grandson. Sylvia activates the investigative magic circle that envelops the container. With a strong reddish glow, she freezes upon seeing the result and states that the potion is far too complex to have been made by the young man. The head maid asks in a trembling tone if that might not actually be the legendary and ancient hero's potion. The legendary hero was the one who defeated the demon race and disappeared without a trace. 50 years ago, legends say there was no dungeon or labyrinth in the entire world capable of containing that incredible strength. His power was so absurdly colossal that even the deities hesitated to stand against him. Sylvia clenches her hands anxiously, remembering an ancient contract that is sealed deep at the bottom of the mansion's labyrinth. The old man tries to keep his feet on the ground, saying that the true hero's potion should have a much greater efficacy. Furthermore, he refuses to accept that theory because of a fact that seems completely obvious to him. The old man concludes that there is not the slightest possibility of his fragile grandson being the great savior of the world from the past, but he announces that he will ask for another, better potion so that his sister can also experience that same freedom. His sister has been living in a deep sleep for centuries, and he believes Lion's formula might help her wake up. Sylvia lets out a discreet giggle full of affection, seeing how much her master trusts the young man's potential. Patrick breaks the serious mood with a good-natured laugh that echoes with joy through the corners of the library. She remembers that the most useless thing in the world is to worry about a witch who has 1,000 years of life and immense power. She advises the old man not to burden the young man with unnecessary worries about his health and well-being. Even so, the woman bows and says she gladly accepts the sincere affection his grandson showed for her. Patrick observes her departure in silence, and his thoughts soon turn back to his beloved sister. Later, Lion returns to the library and notices that his grandfather's countenance looks extremely worried about something. Patrick promptly denies any sign of worry, saying that all of that is nothing but a bunch of nonsense. Lion starts guessing several funny reasons for the old man's bad mood, leaving him with popping veins from anger. The young man finally hits the mark by asking if the problem is the potion, and the patriarch gulps, seeing that he was caught cutting to the chase. The old man goes straight to the point and asks if he is capable of crafting an even more potent version. Lion gets quite thoughtful and assesses that in his current situation, it would be very difficult to make anything above 2 stars. He recalls that the rare herbs are gone and that the latest success only happened due to pure luck and good equipment. But he decides to take advantage of his investors' great interest and guarantees that it is possible to do indeed. But with time before accepting the task, the young man curiously asks his grandfather what the use of that new formula would be. Patrick reveals that he intends to give the potion as a gift to the headmaid, leaving the young man completely shocked. The young man begins to hilariously fantasize that there is a secret romantic vibe sparking between the two elderly people. To support his grandfather, Lion asks for a 2-week deadline, promising to deliver a potion worthy of winning anyone over. The patriarch widens his eyes, extremely surprised and indignant to hear that he will have to wait for so long. Startled by the reaction, Lion drops the deadline to 1 week and runs out of the room before the old man changes his mind. He celebrates in the hallways, seeing that as the golden opportunity to get on the good side of the richest man in the house. Back in the library, the old man tries to yell to stop his grandson's escape, but it was already too late to prevent him. While walking through the sunny forest, the young man begins to worry about how he will create a 3-star formula. He knows that buying expensive herbs would be useless without the necessary level and considers buying a ready-made potion with gold. But then he remembers a very important resource and decides it's time to check the items in the coin shop. The virtual shop menu opens, revealing that the catalog is limited and that he does not have a sufficient balance yet. He takes a fright upon seeing the exorbitant prices of the products and wonders if the old stockroom key is made of pure gold. He complains that the worn-out items should be cheaper and decides to flip through the other tabs of the shopping menu. The boy is horrified to see that the magical seasoning costs a fortune and concludes that he won't be able to buy anything from there. Left with no easy shopping options, he realizes he will have to resort to the traditional and laborious method of training. He concludes that his hands have a physical limit for harvesting and that he will need something fundamental to continue. The young man decides that his next big investment goal must be purchasing top-tier tools. Inside a smoky workshop, a blacksmith works hard hammering a piece of hot iron on the anvil. The assistant yells out to his partner, who responds complaining that he is too busy with his own tasks. But the helper insists, saying that a very wealthy customer with a lot of money to spend has just arrived at the shop. The giant blacksmith appears grumbling, but is surprised to see the young Master Lion waiting patiently in the courtyard. Lion approaches with kindness and asks the red-haired giant directly if he is the true owner of that workshop. The young man, dressed in noble and elegant clothes, surprises the blacksmith by asking if he could learn to forge there. In the face of the blacksmith's astonishment, the young man quickly explains that he has no intention of doing that training for free. He opens a bag filled with glowing gold coins and offers an absurdly generous reward for the favor. Lion observes, intrigued, the tools displayed in the shop's showcase and begins to assess their quality. He notices that those hoes have a rather weak quality because the great blacksmiths only want to forge valuable weapons. He knows that even being the eldest son of the prestigious Astri family, he wouldn't get a perfect tool that fast. The young man approaches one of the local blacksmiths and asks in a direct way if he could test his skills at the forge there with a very friendly smile on his face. He shows a bag of coins and promises to give an incredibly generous reward. The bag is so stuffed with glowing gold coins that it leaves anyone completely dazzled by such wealth. The dwarf blacksmith complains, irritated about putting up with noble games, while his partner desperately tries to calm him down. The young helper tries to return the bag of coins, explaining with all patience that such an amount is an exaggeration for a hoe. Lion smiles awkwardly and agrees with the young man, who warns in a friendly manner about the dangers of scammers out there. The blacksmith then takes the initiative to guide the young noble and prepares to start the work inside the workshop. The sturdy dwarf glares at Lion with suspicion and questions if such a delicate young man can actually handle the heavy work of forging. Lion immediately recognizes that imposing figure as a member of the legendary and proud race of dwarfs from that world. He remembers that this incredible race possesses such an absurd resistance that not even the hottest fire is capable of burning them. In addition to a simply colossal physical strength, they are also known worldwide for their extreme attention to detail. Lion is surprised to find a pure dwarf there, and the blacksmith crosses his arms, asking in a sharp way what his name is. The young man introduces himself politely, and the dwarf quickly recognizes him as the famous weirdo from the prestigious Asteri family. The dwarf yells to prepare a space for the visitor, while his helper almost panics at such a lack of manners. The blacksmith points to one of the free forges and tells his helper to work hard to assist the noble in that task. Lion tries to ask the master's name, but notices that the grumpy giant has already left without paying the slightest attention to him. The young helper introduces himself as John and explains that his sharp master's name is Mudu before calling him to follow. He begins to guide the young man through the workshop hallways, showing all the equipment and tools available on site. John asks the customer to make himself completely at home, while Lion observes everything around him with eyes full of curiosity. The guide explains that the pieces produced in that inner area are the same ones that end up going to the showcase outside. Lion notices that their techniques are extremely meticulous and the tools are excellent, but feels that something is still wrong. He stands thoughtfully looking at the flames and wonders why such a perfect process generates low-quality items. Suddenly, the young man turns quickly upon feeling a totally unusual and mysterious presence emerging from inside the cauldron. A system notification reveals that a low-level and highly weakened fire spirit is glaring at the young master. Without losing time, Lion asks the helper directly if the fire in that forge is usually weak like that. John scratches his head quite awkwardly and hesitantly admits that the flame really isn't in its best state today. Mudu appears carrying a metal plate and confirms that the strength of the fire has decreased a lot, but wants to know how the boy noticed that the young man responds calmly that the flame itself revealed its current state to him, leaving the dwarf blacksmith in absolute shock. John tries to resume the explanation about the hose, but the giant dwarf abruptly interrupts him, telling him to stop right there. The master sharply orders the helper to leave the premises because he needs to speak with the young noble in a private manner. The two go to the outside part of the workshop, where the dwarf glares at him with quite a bit of seriousness while the wind blows the leaves. With an extremely focused look, the blacksmith asks if he really managed to see the spirit, and Lion confirms that yes, Mudu wants to know if the young man is capable of healing the small, weakened spirit, and Lion responds with doubt that perhaps he can. The dwarf promises that if he solves this mystery, he will personally teach him the art of forging and still do something very special. He guarantees that he will place all of the young master's orders as top priority in the workshop, leaving Lion very surprised. The boy remembers that this workshop is so famous throughout the region that it receives dozens of important requests from other places. Faced with such a wonderful opportunity, the young man accepts the challenge with a big smile and guarantees he will solve the problem Mudu vents that he worked hard to expand the workshop, but now the fire spirit ended up losing all its strength. The dwarf reveals that, because he is unable to understand spirits, he is about to see the quality of his products drop for good. Although he finds the young man fragile, the blacksmith places his hopes in him, while Lion thinks of a quick solution to the problem. The young man explains that the magical creature is dying of thirst. Leaving the dwarf master completely confused by that revelation, Lion suggests throwing some water on the flame, but the dwarf quickly loses his patience, asking if he has lost his mind for good. The blacksmith yells nervously, not knowing what to do, and Lion tries to calm him down, explaining that they need something special for the creature. Desperate, the dwarf promises to give even his greatest masterpiece if the young master manages to save the workshop from that ruin. Lion asks with a serious look if the blacksmith is telling the truth, and the sturdy dwarf confirms without hesitating even 1 second. The two seal the deal with a firm handshake, and the young man promises that he will start working on the solution that very night. Night finally falls over the peaceful region, wrapping the large workshop under the soft light of an incredibly bright moon. Lion laughs a little, realizing that he ended up working overtime there too without it being in his plans. The small fire spirit complains of great thirst, and Lion promises that he will prepare a special drink for it very quickly. He understands that the spirit collapsed because that large workshop forces it to work too much without any rest. The young man locates the perfect ingredient for the recipe and decides to use a sprig of water rosemary to solve the problem. He explains that the savory herb turns into an excellent consumable oil for the small fire spirit. If processed this way, the system quickly reveals the success of the creation, displaying the refreshing properties of that oil custom-made for it. The young man pours the liquid on the flame, which reacts very well while its hydration level begins to restore fast. Since the creature's thirst has not been fully quenched yet, the young master goes back to the stove, promising to cook a little more. He squeezes the fresh leaves with quite a bit of force to extract every last drop of essential oil for the small spirit. The magical creature finally gets its energy fully restored and grows in size, glowing with great intensity. The system warns that the creature is very grateful and grants the young man an excellent amount of experience points. The giant dwarf invades the room, running with open arms, and celebrates euphorically, yelling that the young noble actually did it. He glares at the young man with eyes glowing from pure admiration and stands almost speechless before such an extraordinary feat. Mudu asks if he is all right upon noticing his fatigue, and the young man tries to cover it up, saying with a smile that everything is under control. But in reality, he can barely stand on his feet from having spent the entire night awake working hard without any rest. Left with no strength, the young man ends up fainting on the workshop floor, leaving the giant dwarf in complete despair and yelling for help. Mudu runs to him, begging for the young noble to hold on while trying in every way to wake him up right there on the floor. Time passes, and smoke begins to rise calmly through the workshop's chimney under the blue and sunny sky of a beautiful morning. When he finally opens his eyes, Lion comes face to face with two cute children staring at him full of curiosity about his name. The young man introduces himself in a friendly way after the siblings reveal their curious names during a pleasant morning meal. The young man smiles from the corner of his mouth, seeing the massive closeness of those siblings, and finds their dynamics extremely cute and fun. He remembers that he also had a younger brother in his past life, although the relationship between the two was quite complicated, but he quickly brushes away those thoughts, deciding to focus only on his own path, without caring about leading the family. Suddenly, the living room door opens with the arrival of a lady who interrupts those children's fun conversation. She tells her children to go play outside so they don't disrupt the meal, while one of them plays with the young man's nickname. The young noble lets out a fun laugh and reaffirms that his true name is Lion so that the little boy can remember. The boy says he prefers to call him Young Master because he thinks it is much cooler, and Lion agrees in a super casual way. The mother runs after the little mischief makers to finally put them out of there, leaving the environment much calmer. The woman of the house apologizes for her children's behavior, but Lion reassures her, praising the delicious soup she made. She confesses that she took a huge fright when her giant husband brought the young master fainted in his arms early on. The woman tearfully thanks him for having helped her husband, and Lion responds that the meal and the rest are already enough. Mudu opens the door asking if the young man managed to rest well, while the children run excited to greet their father. The giant holds his children in his lap with affection, confirming that the young noble truly saved the small fire spirit. The young man gives a satisfied smile and announces that he has already finished his meal and that now he is ready to get back to work. The dwarf reveals with a very focused look that he has already left all the materials in the workshop fully prepared for them upon entering the place. The young master widens his eyes and stands completely surprised by what he finds before him. He comes across a showcase filled with incredible tools, and the dwarf reinforces that his requests will always be a priority. The dwarf master says that that is not the most important thing and calls the young man to follow him to the main work area. There, Lion widens his eyes as he approaches and tries to identify what kind of extraordinary metal is piled right in front of him. The dwarf shows a massive pile of refined, high-quality iron bars ready to be used by the young master. The young man thanks him for the seriousness of the teaching and the dwarf jokes, asking if he thought it would be just a cheap imitation. Lion denies it, laughing, and says he wants to learn everything as fast as possible, and the master prepares to make the first demonstration. The blacksmith warns with seriousness that the true foundation of all forging begins with the perfect control of the metal's temperature. He explains that the piece turning red doesn't mean it's ready, and that excess heat can melt the material for good. At the exact moment the metal reaches an intense golden glow, the dwarf master warns that that is the perfect time to act. He begins to hammer the piece, demonstrating that the big secret is controlling the force to shape the ideal thickness of the blade. The next step after giving the basic shape is precisely adjusting every detail and then using the sharpening stone to give the edge to conclude the process. The blacksmith exerts force with his hands and very firmly fixes the wooden handle onto the iron base. He raises the finished tool that glows intensely and asks with a smile if the young man found the process too difficult. Lion thanks him for having the help of the best master of all and asks very excitedly if he can use all those iron bars. Mudu gives permission to use the bars, and Lion accepts in a super excited way, carrying all the material all at once. The dwarf panics upon seeing the young man throwing all the iron bars straight into the fire without doing any preparation beforehand. With a very confident smile on his face, the young master says he is just going to test a different method when it's time to forge. The young man begins to work hard, hammering the hot metal, and realizes that the physical effort is much greater than he imagined. But his first attempt results in a total failure, with the system warning that the piece became completely unusable. Even though he is quite tired, Lion refuses to give up and decides to keep trying until he manages to hit the ideal point of the forge. The young master insists on the repetitive work, and gradually his completion rate and progress begin to rise slowly. He heats the iron bar in the forge once more, feeling that he has finally found the ideal rhythm and heat to shape, and next, prepares to hammer. He begins to strike the iron with all his strength. And finally, the system celebrates his success, unlocking the blacksmith talent, while the dwarf master yells, incredulous. At that evolution, Mudu gets extremely excited with what he has just seen, and tells the young man to use that perfect base to finish the hoe. The experienced dwarf notices that the energy of that metal piece is totally different and far superior to any other. The proto begins to sharpen the hoe to finalize the piece and next attaches its handle. With that, Lion has finally completed his new magical hoe, which now possesses incredible properties and the power of the small fire spirit. The dwarf yells that the young man has an absurd talent and guarantees that that hoe is better than the ones made by royal blacksmiths. Mudu insists that he should celebrate more, but the young man decides it is better to take a short break so he can rest. But right after, Lion hugs the dwarf with a mischievous smile and asks him to teach now how to forge a magical scythe. The giant blacksmith stands completely static and reactionless before the untiring energy and determination of that noble young man. He lets out an extremely loud laugh and admits in a fun way that the obstinacy of that young master is madness. The master accepts the challenge, promising to teach everything he knows while Lion celebrates, thinking that his plan is working out. Under the soft light of the full moon, the young master promises in thought that he will fulfill the grand wish of his beloved grandfather soon. During the silence of that dark night, rhythmic digging sounds begin to echo in a mysterious way through the dense woods. Lion uses his new magical hoe to strike the earth with quite a bit of precision and agility in search of rare items in the forest. The system reveals that he has just gathered a rare finger ginseng root, perfect for restoring energy and making potions. He observes the item in his hands, impressed by how much the new tool facilitated the harvesting of valuable plants there. The young man realizes that that special hoe brings incredible benefits that go way beyond a simple improvement in harvesting. With the two new tools in hand, he notices that a much greater amount of rare herbs has begun to glow around him. He smiles satisfied upon realizing that if he improves his proficiency a bit more, he will manage to create the 3-star potion. The young man decides that he will keep digging and practicing without stopping through the forest until he gets totally used to the new items. His excavations soon yield more positive results with the harvesting of leaves and shoots of a very exotic sweet potato from there. Looking at the hole in the ground, Lion confirms his suspicions and realizes that there are several potatoes buried right below him. But suddenly, the hoe begins to emanate an absurd heat and ignites in flames, startling the young man who almost falls backward. The system reveals that the blessing of the fire spirit was activated and perfectly roasted the sweet potatoes that were in the ground. He holds the warm food and celebrates upon reading that the special roasting effect can be applied to any food. From there, the young man's mouth waters seeing how the food turned out incredibly golden and perfect with just one strike of the hoe. Sensing that wonderful smell, he decides that he will take a break to eat before continuing his arduous work there. The young master takes a bite of the warm sweet potato and jumps from a fright, realizing how incredibly hot the food still is. Even while burning his mouth a bit, he delights in the meal, blowing on the food to manage to eat without hurting himself much. He chews happily, thinking that this type of food always tastes much more flavorful when it is consumed super hot. The young man praises the sweetness in just the right measure and the rustic, unique flavor that magically roasted root possesses in every bite. He remembers that eating that warm potato gives the same comforting feeling as when he consumed the food with milk on earth. Sitting comfortably on the forest grass, the young master clenches his fists and savors every bite with a lot of happiness. While he enjoys his meal, some chubby and cute little birds land calmly right next to him, in the middle of the woods. Lion observes one of the little creatures that stares at him with fixed little eyes and asks in a gentle way if it also wants a piece. With a lot of gentleness, the young man breaks off a very small little piece of the sweet potato and throws it on the ground for the little bird to feed. The little creature swallows the piece and gets incredibly happy, while the young master smiles and tells it to eat plenty without rushing. Several birds begin to fly around him with hearts, and Lion remembers an old game companion with affection, with his energies fully renewed. He gets up and decides it is time to start gathering the ingredients for his potions. Lion decides that first he must dig up a few more sweet potatoes before starting to gather the herbs for the potions. A beautiful sunny day with butterflies flying appears over the massive and imposing main mansion of the Asteri family. The assistant gets worried, remembering that it has already been 3 whole days since the young Master Lion left home without giving news. He sighs upset upon confirming that the heir has not returned yet, but suddenly hears a familiar voice and turns quickly. The main head maid appears behind him with a very cold and imposing look that leaves him instantly tense in the garden. He vents to her about the terrible rumors that the young master is close to the end or about to be cast out of the family. Suddenly, Lion emerges from the middle of the trees, waving happily with a little bird on his shoulder and leaving the two quite surprised. The two run startled toward the young man, wanting to know the reason for him being so dirty, and Lion says calmly that he is fine. The young master scratches the back of his neck, giving a beautiful smile, and guarantees that nothing serious happened to him during all this time. The assistant is taken aback by the dirt and asks intrigued about the chubby little bird that is perched on his shoulder. Lion looks surprised at his shoulder and wonders when it was that small little creature decided to follow him to his mansion. The imposing headmaid approaches the young man with a rather serious countenance. Drawing his attention with all her politeness, she says that he can already stop with that, but the young man only asks if she received any message from his powerful grandfather about him. The young man puts his hand to his forehead, faking disappointment, and comments in a funny way that his grandfather really doesn't know how to keep a secret. She gets confused, and Lion asks for patience, explaining that it took time to find the ingredients, but that he got everything he needed. The headmaid widens her eyes in complete shock and asks with incredulity if he actually obtained the rare ingredients. The young master runs excited toward the mansion, promising to prepare the magical potion as fast as he can for them. He waves from afar, telling his assistant not to worry and to go rest, while the young man seems about to cry from relief. The helper runs after him, yelling for him to at least use medicine on the scratches, but the young master continues his run. Sylvia remains in silence, watching the young man walk away with a deeply touched and reflective expression on her face. She recalls that, because she is a witch, most potions do not work on her, but she always had a special affection for that boy. Remembering how much the boy was always sick and fragile, and now seeing him work hard and spend nights awake leaves her emotional. A very sweet feeling of great expectation begins to bloom in the heart of that experienced and powerful lady. She gives a slight smile, aware that the actions of that young man truly stirred her deepest feelings. The headmaid wonders if such a weak young man will actually be capable of creating a magical formula of such an extraordinary level. A few days pass in a fast and peaceful way until the headmaid finally makes her entrance into the patriarch's library. The old master observes his sister's countenance and asks, curious, if that mysterious potion from Lion actually had any effect. She confesses with blushed cheeks that her mind and emotions became incredibly clear and renewed after drinking his potion. She insists that would be impossible without some help from the patriarch, but the powerful old man guarantees he did absolutely nothing. The patriarch points to the paperwork, explaining that he is focused only on the organization of the coming-of-age ceremony of his beloved grandson. But suddenly, the woman gets serious and warns that if the boy did everything alone, this could bring severe political problems for him. She looks at the small vial on the table and states with firmness that formula looks like the legendary potion of the true hero. She explains that in ancient legends, the savior of the world is a legendary figure who emerges to combat the advance of terrible monsters, but she adds that the life of a hero is filled with immense pain, tragic choices, and a very deep existential emptiness. In the end, as soon as peace is restored across the land, they simply disappear like a mere disposable resource of destiny. Patrick clenches his own fists and agrees sadly, saying that these divine warriors vanish without leaving any trace. He remembers that all the surviving companions tried to find him for years, but never found the slightest sign of his whereabouts. The old master then glares at the headmaid and asks with seriousness what they will do if young Lion is in fact this reborn savior. He confesses with deep pain in his chest that he has already lost too many companions in the war and refuses to see his grandson have the same destiny. The headmaid then displays a complicit smile on her face and states that if that is the case, they must hide the young man with all care. Sylvia puffs out her chest in a proud way and announces her immediate retirement, leaving the old patriarch completely in shock. Patrick slams hard on the table, saying that that is madness, and asks if she is really going to give up everything because of their grandson. He remembers that his grand wish was to free her from the ancient secret contract, but the woman interrupts him, calling him by name. She says in a firm and decided way that worrying about the destiny of a witch like her is the most useless thing in all this world. The woman reveals that she has every detail of that ancient contract memorized by heart and begins to walk wrapped in a dark aura. She repeats the magical laws that forbid her from leaving the mansion, but guarantee that she can live freely as a human inside there. She smiles, thinking that thanks to the potion of that adorable young man, she could finally feel like a true human after so much time. She reveals her true and stunning young form, promising to protect the young man closely with all her colossal witch power. Meanwhile, in another part of the castle, the surprising news arises about the unexpected hiring of a new head maid. The second son of the family, Lixil Asteri, listens to the news and questions irritated if she will really be Lion's exclusive servant. He is considered an unprecedented genius and the youngest fourth circle mage in all the history of that dynasty. Because he looks so much like his grandfather Patrick, everyone views his youth as a true weapon of combat and power. For an extremely intelligent and focused young man like him, the sudden arrival of the new servant seemed very suspicious. Lixil analyzes the documents and concludes that it makes no sense for Sylvia to retire all of a sudden to make room for another person. It all began the previous night while he was thoughtful in his luxurious room lit by the soft light of the moon. He talked with Sylvia and asked surprised if she was really going to retire and leave the grand castle forever. She confirmed with a mild smile, saying that the potion given by Lion worked a true miracle on her physical health. He got intrigued hearing that and admitted with seriousness that he still couldn't understand how all of that happened. The headmaid then suggested in a perceptive way that he go see with his own eyes the activities of his older brother. She recalled that he used to follow his older brother everywhere when he was little, leaving him quite awkward. The experienced lady guaranteed that everything was the absolute truth and left a subtle invitation to quench his curiosity. She advised that following Lion for just a single day could reveal incredible secrets about his sudden change. The young man reflects that that makes no sense at all and questions himself if his foolish brother is really the one responsible for all this. Decided to discover the truth, he runs out of the castle destined for the forest to watch his brother's steps. The scenery changes to the dark and mysterious forest of Mimir, which is located right on the boundaries of the Asteri territory. Lixil walks through the dark place, complaining that the dense woods remain extremely deserted and without any visible trail. He wonders why his brother likes it there so much and thinks he could have just sent the helper to gather the plants. Suddenly, a repetitive digging sound catches the young man's attention, and he tries to identify where that weird sound comes from. He walks silently to the gap in the trees and stops in shock upon spotting his brother, crouched in the middle of the clearing. Lixil observes with quite a bit of confusion, while Lion holds a glowing item in his hands in the middle of that dense darkness of the woods. To the absolute despair of the younger brother, the young man opens his mouth, preparing to take a giant bite out of that potato. In total panic, Lixil draws his wand and uses wind magic, yelling for his brother to stop that madness immediately. The spell hits the sweet potato and hurls it far away, making the young master scream from affright at that unexpected attack. A completely awkward silence settles in the place, while the roasted potato rolls and stops in the middle of the damp lawn. Upon realizing that his precious food fell on the ground and got dirty and ruined, Lion falls to his knees, crying in despair. The young master turns with anger, asking who is there, and Lixil snaps back, demanding an explanation for that bizarre scene. Lixil turns completely red with embarrassment for having ruined his plan to spy on his older brother in secret. Lion glares at him and begins to create cute theories, wondering if his younger brother walked all that way just to visit him. The young man freezes for a second, comically fantasizing that his brother came only to keep tight surveillance over him. Lixil apologizes for the magic and says he couldn't let him eat dirt, but the young man snaps back that potatoes grow in the dirt. The young noble uses complicated scientific terms to refer to the tuber, leaving Lion without the slightest reaction to respond. Lion stands in absolute shock upon realizing that his baby brother simply has never eaten a delicious sweet potato in his life. The heir mocks in a fun way, saying that he is missing out on the best of life, while the young man gets indignant. The older brother tells him to sit on the wooden log and promises that he will dig up a few more potatoes for them to eat. before starting the digging. Lion turns with a clever smile and asks if his baby brother knows how to master fire magic. He asks the boy to prepare a small campfire to warm them up, and the baby mage accepts, saying that this is super simple. Lixil sits on the wood before the beautiful magical campfire he created himself, observing the flames crackle in the silence. The eldest returns, carrying several fresh potatoes in his arms, and asks happily if the campfire is already quite hot. Without the slightest ceremony, Lion simply throws the potatoes straight into the middle of the burning embers, leaving the youngest, horrified Lixil fears that the potatoes will get totally burned, but his brother guarantees that the thick skin protects the inside perfectly. The two brothers remain seated side by side in the middle of the dark forest, enjoying the welcoming warmth of that campfire, breaking the comfortable silence of the night. Lion decides to initiate a casual conversation with his quiet younger brother. The young master explains that stepping a bit out of the tiring routine and doing something different helps a lot to clear one's thoughts. The youngest listens to Lion's advice about the importance of resting and admits in silence that he understands what he says. The young man stirs the ashes with a twig and celebrates, saying that the aroma is wonderful and that the food is ready to eat. The young mage holds the roasted potato with quite a bit of care and takes his very first bite of that curious rustic dish. As soon as he chews, he widens his eyes and gets blushed cheeks, surprised by the incredibly sweet flavor of the food. He admits enchanted that is truly delicious, and Lion proudly explains that those are the rare banana potatoes. He reflects that on days with a freezing wind in the forest, there is nothing better than eating something very warm to warm up. The system highlights the perfect flavor of the roasted potato with fish bread to face the winter with a lot of energy and joy. Lion observes that Lixil is devouring the sweet potato with an incredible rush and a much larger appetite than he expected. The young master remembers that boys of that age eat like monsters and recalls when he himself ate without stopping at school. Lixil looks startled at the massive pile of potato, skins on the ground, and wonders when it was that he ended up eating so much. Lion smiles, relieved to see that his younger brother liked the rustic food, but the youngest tries to stammer to justify himself. The youngest admits with shyness, and Lion tells him to eat as much as he likes, thanking him for all his hard work in leading the family. The boy reflects on the suffering of seeing his brother so sick and fragile throughout all the years without being able to do anything. But he confesses with all the sincerity in the world that he never viewed that family burden as a true trial. He guarantees that he never blamed Lion for his physical weakness, although he admits with shyness that another feeling existed in his chest. Lixil confesses in a very honest way that in reality, he always felt a tiny bit of envy because Lion had something he lacked. The youngest quickly tries to explain himself nervously so as not to seem ungrateful, while Lion just gives a laugh and says he already does a lot. Lion observes his younger brother's shy countenance and realizes that despite all the genius, he is still just a child. The young man guarantees that it is normal to be selfish sometimes and says that he should have fun whenever he gets tired of studying so much. Lion sits right next to the youngest and places his hand on his shoulder, praising his extraordinary effort up to that moment. Lixil mentally agrees with the advice from the headmaid Sylvia and feels extremely happy for having gone to visit his brother back in his room. Lion checks his virtual menu and gets very satisfied to see that he has accumulated thousands of silver coins. He plans to open the coin shop soon and recognizes that his level went up a lot, helping in the crafting of potions for Sylvia. The young man makes a joke about the rejection his grandfather suffered from Sylvia, while the old man gets comically irritated at his comment. The young man stretches on the bed, celebrating his closeness with Lixil, and decides to relax since he runs no risk of being cast out. Later, the young master walks through the luxurious hallways of the castle and knocks on the imposing wooden door to pay a visit. Upon opening the door, the young man is greeted by a soft female voice and stands completely reactionless with the surprise before him. The beautiful and young maid with dark hair introduces herself as Elvia, but the young man feels that there is something very strange in the air there. The young master quickly begins to connect the dots and comically understands his grandfather's blushed cheeks and actions. With a lot of friendliness, Lion welcomes Elvia, while the beautiful girl bows politely, promising to serve him closely. The young master displays a radiant smile and warmly thanks the new maid for her precious help in the Asteri mansion. He confesses in a mild tone that thanks to the special gift, he and his younger brother Lixil finally managed to get closer. Elvia fakes confusion, saying she doesn't understand what he means by that, and Lion changes the subject in a super casual way. The young man adjusts his leather bag and asks friendly if they can continue that intriguing conversation at another time. The heir opens the grand door and announces happily that he has a very important appointment scheduled with Lixil for that day. The scenery changes to the bustling and noisy town of the fief, where the residents walk happily under the strong light of the afternoon sun. But in the middle of the walk, the young man gets thoughtful and feels that there is a great inexplicable mystery surrounding his physical body. He doesn't understand why his physical energy bar remains so weak even after he walked so much through the mountains of the region. With a lot of fatigue, the young man thinks this might be the side effect of the mana shock and decides he needs to consult a cleric. Lixil slows his pace, seeing his brother so out of breath, and fears he might end up falling sick before their awaited succession ceremony. The youngest plans a secret way to make Lion consult with a cleric in a natural way without raising suspicions in the house. He concludes that participating in volunteer work at the town temple is the perfect opportunity to bring him closer to the eye. Clergy Lion asks where they are going, and the youngest explains that they need ordinary clothes so as not to draw attention in the town. The eldest suggests looking for a regular clothing shop to make the disguise, but the small mage denies with quite a bit of seriousness. With a clever smile on his lips, Lixil reveals that the ideal place to do their shopping is a famous magic item shop. The two soon approach the curious shop, whose entrance has rustic bells that sway and ring softly with the strong wind. Lion stands fascinated while exploring the secret shop, while his younger brother guarantees that only influential people know the place. The young man gets suspicious upon hearing his brother stammer about the legality of the items and makes a joke, leaving the youngest awkward there. But in the same instant, the young man's attention is drawn by a set of strange objects displayed on the wooden shelves. He observes magical pens and earrings with very curious functions and questions why everything looks like children's toys there. Lixil explains awkwardly that he came to know the place at the academy and emphasizes that despite the appearance, the items are very effective in practice. Suddenly, the extravagant shop owner appears with open arms and welcomes the young nobles with a lot of energy. The friendly shopkeeper proudly guarantees that his shop sells everything and highlights the cleaning potions as the greatest successes there. The youngest announces that they are looking for disguise items, and the merchant quickly guides them excitedly to another area of the shop. The shopkeeper gesticulates, showing a massive shelf, and warns that all the pieces displayed there serve as perfect disguises. The merchant shows insoles to increase height and magical bracelets as excellent economical options for alteration. He pulls a rope, revealing the premium products sector, which can alter even the hair color of whoever uses the artifacts. They buy a magical accessory called Unrecognizable Child, capable of completely changing hair and eye color. The bells of the shop door ring happily, while the owner says goodbye to the young nobles, asking them to come back always. Lixil asks what he thought of the place, and the young master responds excited that he found the tool shop super fun. Lion notices some extra freebies inside the package, but his younger brother warns that that shop never usually gives good gifts. The young master gets quite curious and decides to open the mysterious bundle to see what he actually won as a courtesy there. He is startled to see a craftsman's repair kit and realizes that that old freebie is much more valuable than the purchases. Lixil says with naturalness that he has no use for that and gladly gives all the gifts to his brother. The two decide to enter a silent and empty alley of the town to put on the magical disguises and start the plan. A strong bluish magical energy wraps the two young men, altering their physical appearances in an instantaneous and magical way. Lion adjusts his new brown locks and comments marveled about how the transformation was perfect and without flaws. Lixil guarantees that the disguise is ideal for walking through the town, and the Proda accepts excited, ready to start walking. However, upon arriving at the destination, Lion gets very confused and asks why they ended up at a watermill in that region. Lixil patiently explains that the flour produced there is the main item they are going to donate today to the local orphanage. He adds that the mill also crafts fresh, high-quality breads, which leaves the young master quite interested. But Lixil reveals in his thoughts that there is another great secret reason for having chosen precisely that mill. The mill owner Nicholas receives them happily, and Lixil confirms that he really needed to meet with this man. The merchant is a devotee famous for his generous donations to the clergy, and creating a bond with him will facilitate access to the temple. Lixil knows that this way his brother will manage to consult with a cleric, and the merchant asks if all the work went well. The man praises the perfect quality of the harvested wheat, saying it has been a long time since he worked with such an impeccable product. Nicholas asks the reason for buying so much flour, and Lixil states that he wants to help the hungry children he saw in the town. The merchant praises the beautiful initiative and asks if he has already chosen a suitable place to make this generous donation, and Lixil asks if he has any recommendation. While the man thinks thoughtfully, the young brother roots hard in his thoughts for him to mention the temple of the region. Nicholas suggests donating to the orphanage run by the temple, and the small mage vibrates with joy seeing that his plan worked out. The young man asks how many children live under the care of that orphanage, and the merchant estimates that there are about 30. Lixil thought that the place was very well equipped, but the man reveals that the recent lack of funding cut their resources. He mentions that the mage families of the region focus only on themselves and almost never support an orphanage kept by clerics. While Lixil reflects, Nicholas roots for those young nobles to manage to actually help improve the children's lives. Lion interrupts, saying that if they donate only flour, the clerics will still take too much time to manage to bake the breads with a glow in his eyes. The young man suggests that they themselves bake the breads right there on the spot so that the children eat immediately. The proto remembers that perhaps they don't have other ingredients in the kitchen and that fresh bread will make a much bigger success. Nicholas happily agrees, saying it would be an immense pleasure to lend his famous kitchen for them to perform the work. The young man feels a bit guilty for having focused only on his older brother and forgotten the true situation of those children. He observes his brother's gentle smile and stands deeply admired upon seeing how much Lion is a kind and attentive person. Lion clenches his fist with a lot of enthusiasm and agrees that that is the best idea they could have had to help. The three prepare to start cooking in that beautiful mill, lit by the strong and invigorating light of that beautiful afternoon. On the work table, the system highlights the excellent quality ingredients selected with care to start the recipe. The young man assesses the olive oil pots and guarantees that the quality of the ingredient will bring a much richer flavor to the bread dough. Nicholas guides them in the kitchen, explaining that they are going to make a traditional whole wheat bread recipe that the children will love. The experienced baker makes an encouraging gesture with his hand and suggests that they start by preparing just a very small portion. With agile movements, he pours the perfect amount of milk and yeast over the flour to give the ideal point to the dough. Next, the mixture is placed in a container greased with olive oil so that it can rest and rise in a suitable way. When the volume doubles in size, he removes the excess air with his hands and adds some crushed sunflower seeds. Nicholas finalizes by shaping the dough into a perfectly smooth and shiny ball on top of the work table of his bakery. Lixil observes with quite a bit of attention and concludes with a smile that baking breads is infinitely easier than using his magic. The young brother quickly finishes his dough and turns curious to see how the progress of his brother Lion's work is going. Lion sweats cold, quite clumsy with the recipe, and the baker suggests baking his and Lixil's breads first to buy time. Moments later, Nicholas approaches the large wood-fired oven with Lixil and opens the door excited to see the result of the bake. But to everyone's surprise, one of the breads ended up turning completely black and burned in the middle of that warm batch. Nicholas comforts Lixil, saying that the excess dough burned the piece, but guarantees that for a first attempt it was very good. Nicholas smiles and announces that young Master Lion's bread has also just baked and is ready to be removed from the oven. He uses a protective glove and carefully pulls out the baking sheet with the 2 breads baked by Lion to assess the result. An absurdly intense and radiant golden glow emanates from inside the oven, leaving everyone in the kitchen totally blinded. The system reveals that Lion has just created a perfect level, one whole wheat bread that increases his cook mastery soon. The experienced baker glares at that batch of impeccable and golden breads and wonders incredulous how he achieved that. The man wants to know the secret of such success, but the young master only laughs, saying in a humble way that he did nothing too special. He explains that he wanted to give the best bread possible for the orphans of the temple to eat with a lot of joy and satisfaction today. The young man mentions that he made some decorative cuts for the children to like it more, and the baker gets deeply touched. The baker realizes he misjudged the brothers, and Lixil praises Lion's incredible talent for cooking in a very sincere way, taken by a great idea. The baker grabs his bag and asks if they mind continuing to bake alone for a while. Lion calmly agrees, thinking that perhaps they disrupted that man's work routine too much there. Nicholas runs out of the mill in a rush, promising to return as fast as possible to help the generous young noble's Lixil worries, thinking he caused inconveniences, but Lion calms him down, telling them to keep baking the breads in the kitchen. The youngest applies himself, putting on the gloves so as not to stay behind Lion, and the two decide to have a healthy and cute competition. They begin to bake dozens of warm breads, and the system celebrates Lion's excellent advance in cook mastery. With very agile movements, the duo produces a massive amount of delicious cookies and little breads for charity. Suddenly, the baker, Nicholas, returns out of breath to the kitchen, announcing his arrival with quite a bit of noise and enthusiasm on sight. Lion turns surprised by the bakery owner's quick return, but his sentence is cut short by what he sees right behind him. Nicholas did not come alone and brought along a massive crowd of local residents who want to join the beautiful project. A smiling woman explains that Nicholas told everyone about their kindness and that everyone wanted to help, even if just a little. The friendly wife of the dwarf blacksmith reveals that her husband was busy at the forge, but that she made sure to come help. The young master freezes and makes a quick silence sign to prevent her from revealing his disguise before all the people. Without losing more time, the friendly resident places her support tool case on the ground to give start to the preparations. Everyone begins to organize a massive amount of supplies like milk and flour brought from home as generous donations. One of the local residents displays an absurd physical strength by hurling gigantic bags of potatoes with tremendous ease. Lixel stands shocked by the woman's colossal strength, and she reveals with affection that she used to fight bears in her youth. The youngest admires the volume of donations received, and Lion praises the genuine kindness of the people who live in those lands. Lixel observes their union and feels a bit of shame for having started that only with selfish political interests. The boy looks with a lot of affection at Lion and convinces himself that the important thing is ensuring the cure of his beloved older brother. He smiles with pride, convicted that Lion is destined to perform truly grand and heroic feats in the future. A few hours later, the group finally arrives at the beautiful orphanage run by the grand and imposing temple of the Asteri Fief. The humble priestess responsible for the place cries from pure emotion and thanks from all her heart for that massive help. She asks how she can repay such charity, but the young man says with humility that he only wishes for everyone's happiness. Two children run excited, drawn by the aroma of the warm bread, and the priestess tries to calm them down, asking them to say thank you. Other orphans open the boxes, celebrating with joy upon seeing that in addition to food, they won beautiful changes of new clothes from there. The priestess invites the young men to deliver the breads personally, and they accept with a massive smile of satisfaction. Crouched down, Lion delivers with a lot of affection a fresh little bread to each child who says thank you with radiant smiles. Suddenly, in the middle of the children's screams of joy, the young man hears a shy murmur coming from behind a large tree. Looking with attention, he spots a little boy with dark hair and a sad look hidden in the middle of the dense vegetation there. The little one gets startled upon being discovered and runs away out of fear. Leaving the young master quite curious with that reaction, Lion asks the director of the place who that startled little boy was, and she explains with sadness that his name is Peter. She apologizes for the prickly behavior and asks with all the sweetness of the world for the young men not to hold a grudge against that boy. The little boy Peter continues running far away from there while his name echoes in a very thoughtful way in the young man's mind. The priestess comments, relieved, that practically all the children of the orphanage have already received their delicious meals. Suddenly, she notices the young noble walking away with a full wicker basket and asks, intrigued, where he is going. The young man turns with an extremely sweet smile and warns that little Peter has not won his warm little bread today. Yet she recalls that the boy was rejected 3 times for his extreme shyness and started to refuse any charity out of pure pain. Lixel silently approaches the tree, observing that the boy seems to have the same age as the blacksmith's children. The young man looks at the boy's arms and feels a tightening of compassion in his chest upon seeing how extremely thin he is. With an incredibly mild and friendly voice, Lixel calls out the boy's name, who shrinks startled by that approach. Lion approaches little Peter in a very gentle way and offers a piece of warm bread that he kept just for him. He shows the golden wheat bread from very close and begins to praise the wonderful aroma and the soft texture of the food. The little boy's stomach rumbles extremely loud, betraying that he is dying of hunger in the reality of that moment. Lion notices that his hunger is real, but the boy tries to hide it, shrinking even more so as not to give in. The young man realizes that it is not a matter of a simple tantrum and gets thoughtful, seeing that Peter refuses food even while very hungry. He concludes that the boy needs some time to trust and decides to simply sit next to him in silence. Meanwhile, the other volunteers say goodbye happily and thank for the excellent teamwork on that day. Time passes, and Peter ends up falling asleep right there on the grass, waking up confused upon realizing that he ended up dozing off. The boy thinks that the volunteers have already left and grumbles quietly, calling everyone fake for acting that way. He thinks that they only seek personal satisfaction, but takes a fright when the young man asks with a smile if he woke up. The boy gets startled and yells, asking the reason for him still being there, but Lion explains that he didn't want to disrupt his sleep. The young man says he is dying of hunger and offers in a super casual way a piece of the delicious warm bread to him. Peter pouts and turns his face, refusing the food again, while Lion asks if he really isn't going to eat anything. With an enigmatic smile on his lips, the young man agrees and holds the warm bread, pretending he is going to take a drastic action. Suddenly, the young master tears the bread in half with quite a bit of force, leaving the small boy totally intrigued by the scene. Lion simply takes a giant bite of the bread, and the boy yells without understanding anything about what he is doing there now. The young man says he is eating the bread since the boy didn't want it, and the boy stammers without knowing how to react before that response. Peter stands completely reactionless and lets out a desperate cry upon seeing that his delicious bread is being devoured like that. Little Peter yells desperate, saying he will eat, and advances quickly to grab the other half of the bread on the spot. The little boy bites the bread and gets eyes glowing upon realizing that the food is incredibly delicious and warm. He begins to devour the bread with a lot of desire and rush, while the young master observes him with a very tender and calm look. Suddenly, Lion extends his hand, offering another piece of bread, leaving the small boy rather surprised by the gesture. The young master reveals with a beautiful smile on his face that that was his own portion, but that he makes a point of giving it to him. Peter glares at the young man's warm eyes and thinks in silence about how much that gentle attitude seems strange to him. He reflects that that food is just a piece of ordinary bread, without any truly rare or special ingredient there. The boy observes the young man seated on the grass and wonders, intrigued, the reason for that simple bread being so incredibly tasty. The boy remembers that charity usually is just faking for the rich to display status before the society of the kingdom. He recalls sadly that the adults who faked being nice always ended up abandoning him in the orphanage again. Convicted that adults are all liars, he continues devouring the food to try to push away those feelings. Suddenly, Lion's voice breaks the silence, and the young man asks in a very mild way if the little one knew a fun fact. Lion says that sad adults skip meals and regret it, but praises Peter for eating well despite being so upset. With an extremely warm smile, the young man confesses that when preparing the bread today, he rooted for someone to like eating it. The young man says he is very happy that he likes it so much, and the small boy cannot hold back the tears that fall. Lion asks surprised if the boy is crying, and Peter responds in tears that it is because the bread is too tasty. The young man asks affectionately if it is true, and the little boy agrees with red cheeks from pure shyness and emotion. The boy says a quiet thank you in the middle of the lit forest, and Lion listens with a very comforting feeling in his chest. Lion extends his pinky, promising that he will make more delicious breads to bring to him on a next opportunity. The boy questions, surprised about the promise, and the young man guarantees in a confident way that he never broke an oath in his life. The young man asks him to keep that notice well in his mind, while he displays a smile of pure confidence and complicity there. The two cross their pinkies, sealing the pact, and Peter says, excited that he is going to eat 2 whole breads next time. Lion jokes that he should eat 3 instead, and pats the boy's head while the priestess observes the scene from afar. The good woman gets extremely moved upon seeing that welcoming scene unfold right before her own eyes. She remembers with quite a bit of emotion that it had been a long time since she saw such a sincere and joyful smile on that boy's face. The woman feels ashamed for having distanced herself so much. While Lion invites the boy to go play with his friends, she observes the two walking hand in hand under the light of the evening and wishes that God blesses such a kind young man. The sun begins to set on the horizon while the children say goodbye happily, yelling for them to return soon. But suddenly the director asks with urgency for them to wait and stay a bit longer at the orphanage before leaving. She reveals very enthusiastically that she got in touch with the clergy and that a priest is coming to bless the children today. She suggests that they also receive the blessing before departing, leaving the two brothers completely surprised by the invitation. Lixil vibrates with joy seeing that his secret plan worked out and accepts the invitation politely to receive such a blessing. The director of the place guides them politely and asks for the two brothers to follow her through a more reserved path. From there, she comments that the priest must be arriving at any moment, and from afar, horse hooves sounds begin to echo. Inside a luxurious carriage, a young and imposing cleric with glasses observes the path with a very focused look. Lixil gets worried about possible dangers and suggests postponing the meeting, but his brother agrees on the spot without questioning anything. Lion invents an excuse, saying he remembered an appointment at the mansion and leaves the youngest surprised with the quick reaction. The young master goes running excited, saying he needs to practice his cooking, and says goodbye. Leaving his brother confused, Lixil thinks that everything went well because he wanted to test the priest's intentions before introducing him to his fragile brother. He opens the door, decided to assess the cleric personally, and is received with a polite greeting coming from inside the room. The imposing cleric introduces himself as Licht and blesses the young noble, thanking for the anonymous donations made to the orphanage. Licht comments about his wish to maintain anonymity, and the small mage confirms in a polite way. While they sit down, Lixel notices that the cleric is very young for his position and deduces that he must be someone with out-of-the-ordinary skills. The cleric thanks from his heart for the good actions, and Lixel shares the merits in a humble way while sipping a warm tea. The boy makes sure to praise his older brother, revealing that the idea to donate the delicious breads came entirely from him. Licht asks if it was the brother who left earlier for not feeling very well, and Lixel confirms that yes. With a sad look and his hands well joined, the young mage reveals that his beloved brother always had quite a weakened health. He honestly confesses that he participated in the charity only to manage to bring his brother closer to the clergy in search of help. Licht smiles in an understanding way and says that it is truly a shame to see such a generous person suffering from a severe illness. The priest whispers that he also left the temple in hiding and leaves the young mage rather surprised with that revelation of his. The young man gets tense, unable to decipher Licht's enigmatic expression, and wonders if he is going to refuse his request. Suddenly, Licht suggests that they schedule a new meeting 3 days from then, leaving the young mage in a state of alert. The cleric asks for the boy to return at that same time, accompanied by his older brother so that they can talk. Back at the mansion, a desperate yell for the older brother echoes in a very loud way through the palace hallways. Lixel scolds his brother for being awake in the middle of the night, and the blonde responds with laziness that he couldn't sleep. Lion asks curious about the rush, and the younger brother tells excited that the priest accepted to assess his health state. Lion gets confused with the news, but the youngest explains that the cleric wants to repay the massive help provided to the orphanage. He reflects in silence that in reality, his health is perfect since he controlled the mana and that he has no illness at all. The young man remembers that he even gained physical resistance during the walks, but decides to accept the invitation so as not to be rude. Lion happily confirms that he will go to the meeting, and the younger brother gets radiant with happiness upon hearing his response. The small mage warns that the cleric scheduled the consultation in a rather unusual way right at the hour of dawn of that day. 3 days later at the temple, Lion analyzes the high-level holy water created by the young cleric and stands very impressed. Lixel calls the attention of his older brother, who turns quickly upon realizing his approach with the great priest Lion, greets the cleric politely, and Licht responds wishing that the wonderful grace of God be with them there. With a very calm and friendly countenance, the cleric suggests that everyone settle comfortably to talk better. Lion decides to start the conversation in a casual way and announces that he has a great curiosity he would like to satisfy soon. The young man asks, without beating around the bush, what the true reason for the meeting having been scheduled so early in that cold dawn was. Licht reveals that he had an enigmatic dream where the two brothers appeared together, leaving both rather surprised by that. He explains that priests with great divine power usually receive prophetic revelations through their own dreams. The young brother asks curious how the dream was, and Licht responds with modesty that it is nothing very grand. He mentions that he dreamed about the children sleeping in the field and that the two brothers were there with slightly different clothes. Licht says that the dream brought so much peace that he felt a need to meet them and confirm a personal suspicion of his. The cleric wanted to understand what kind of people would be capable of invading his divine thoughts in that such a clear way. He analyzes the details in silence and notices that the younger brother is an extremely young and very well-educated mage from there. He is suspicious of their nobility and considers that they might be spies from the Asteri family trying to obtain secrets from the temple. The cleric suggests starting the health treatment, and Lixel agrees, deciding to step out to leave them alone in the grand room. Licht approaches, announcing the start of the procedure, and Lion settles in the chair, trusting the priest's work. A strong and stunning aura of divine and greenish energy wraps Lion's body, starting the magical purification. But suddenly the priest interrupts the process and furrows his brow, quite confused upon feeling that something very strange occurred. He realizes that his divine blessing caused absolutely no physical change in the blonde-haired young man's body, quite suspicious. The cleric focuses his energy again and wonders if he ended up making some silly mistake in the conjuration. Licht widens his eyes in absolute shock upon discovering the truth, and Lion gives a mysterious smile upon noticing his reaction. Lion opens his eyes with a big smile and comments happily that his physical body is already feeling much better. The young man warns that that amount of blessing is already enough, but the cleric stammers. Quite confused with that, Licht notices that there are only 3 possible reasons for a body not to display any improvement after his blessing. The first is rejection of strong magic, and the second is when the person already possesses a simply perfect health by themselves. And the last reason is when the individual was born with the inevitable destiny of having an extremely short life in that world moved. The priest approaches the blonde and guarantees that he will be always at his disposal to help him when he needs. Suddenly, the cleric holds the young master's hands in an extremely firm and sudden way, startling the young man on the spot. Lich tells him to go to the temple and say his name whenever he feels so many pains in the body that he is unable to fall asleep. He says with flames in his eyes that he will help him through all possible means, and Lion just accepts the situation half awkwardly. The two say goodbye politely at the room door, and the young master thanks from his heart for all the cleric's attention. There, Lion walks calmly back to the hallway, while the cleric observes him walk away with a rather worried look. Although he received a beautiful blessing, the blonde scratches his head intrigued, feeling that something very weird is happening. The beautiful sunny morning filled with colors appears lighting the massive and imposing towers of the Grand Astri Castle. Lixil celebrates his brother's improvement after the morning outing, while their luxurious carriage returns to the grand mansion. The young man notices that the magic totally healed the muscle pains he felt after spending hours preparing breads in the kitchen, but he soon notices the terrible dark circles of his younger brother and asks if he is tired, although the boy guarantees he is fine. The youngest warns that he is already going to withdraw to focus on his morning mana trainings, leaving the blonde quite shocked with that. Lion yells worried, warning that he will end up falling sick if he keeps exerting himself so much without having any real rest. Elvia observes the scene from afar and reflects that the young heir's training routine is even more insane and busy lately. Lion fears his brother might feel unwell, and the maid suggests that he talk directly with their grandfather to try to ease that routine. She comments that the patriarch also is very stressed, and the young master soon has a great idea upon hearing that warning. The beautiful girl suggests taking some tasty sweet to please the old patriarch, and Lion agrees in an extremely excited way there. The two soon go to the massive castle kitchen, where the blonde puts on an apron and starts to prepare a delicious recipe. With quite a bit of technique, he uses a heavy wooden rolling pin to roll out the smooth dough on the grand work table. There, Lion thanks for the idea, calling her Sylvia by mistake, and wonders if his stern grandfather actually likes to eat sweets. She corrects him, reminding him of her real name, and guarantees that the old man will eat anything delicious, prepared by his grandson with love. Lion gets a bit awkward with the mistake, but says he really roots for his grandfather to savor plenty each cookie made. But suddenly the young master lets out a yell upon remembering a special secret ingredient and leaves the maid quite curious. She observes him search for something in the supply bags and roots hard for it. Not to be some crazy cooking idea of his, the young man slams 3 roasted sweet potatoes on top of the table and confirms that he intends to use the tuber in the middle of the sweet dough. Elvia thinks that exotic combination very weird, but Lion guarantees that the flavor of the finalized sweet will surprise everyone. He chops the potatoes finely and explains that he will use their natural sugar to create a light sweet perfect for his grandfather. With a big smile on his face, he prepares for the next stage, which consists of giving beautiful shapes to the cookies. He shapes the cookies into cute forms of stars and kittens, thinking about asking for new cutters from the craftsman in the future. He places the baking sheets filled with decorated cookies straight into the hot oven and prepares to wait the necessary time. The system celebrates the success of the special sweet potato cookie recipe, which even possesses the power to reduce fatigue. Lion gets confused seeing potion effects on the food, and the maid stands admired since she only taught him the basic dough recipe. The beautiful maid says that tasting is the main part and invites the blonde to savor the very first cookie of that batch. He bites the cookie and delights himself, thinking that the flavor is superior to that of any chocolate sweet he ate in his past life. Elvia smiles and says that sweets help to combat fatigue, and that because it is not very sugary, his grandfather will surely approve. The young master thanks immensely for her help, and the maid suggests dividing the ready cookies into individual portions, but Lion takes the initiative to do the division alone and tells the tired maid to go rest, leaving the girl quite surprised with a mischievous smile. He explains that he still has other important preparations to do, and that he needs to keep cooking. The blonde waits for Elvia to leave, and thinks relieved that he couldn't open his magical inventory close to other people of the mansion. He celebrates that he unlocked new recipes upon rising in level, and decides to create a special drink to pair with the cookies. The young man selects the ingredients on his virtual screen, and chooses to create an ideal support drink for physical trainings. Reads the properties of the Crimson Support Drink, and guarantees that both his brother and his grandfather will love the new liquid. The boy thinks that curious combination familiar, but focuses on maintaining attention on the high quality of the selected ingredients. He smells the lemons and the oranges harvested in the garden, confirming that they are extremely fresh and perfect for the recipe. With the ingredients organized on the counter, he rolls up his sleeves and prepares to give start to the new and incredible recipe. Lion starts by washing very well the fresh fruits, cutting everything into slices, and placing the potion to simmer over low heat. At the moment the fruits are at the ideal point, he adds the cinnamon stick, waiting for the aroma to be well extracted from there. As soon as that wonderful perfume starts to rise, the blonde passes all the hot mixture through a fine strainer in the kitchen. To finalize the recipe, he throws a single drop of rosemary oil, completing the beautiful crimson drink in his cup. With the recipe ready, the system reveals the crimson drink that reminds a lot of the traditional mulled wine consumed in his old life. He takes a sip of the drink and approves the flavor, deciding to organize everything on the tray next to the freshly baked cookies. The tray looks stunning, and the system warns that the combo of cookies and crimson drink will drastically reduce fatigue. The blonde celebrates upon gaining extra experience points and silver coins after completing this great cooking achievement. He finally takes off his kitchen apron and places it aside on the counter, preparing himself for his next important task. Carrying the golden tray with a lot of pride, he prepares to go visit his strict grandfather in the main library. Patrick is thoughtful in his massive chair until the young blonde opens the door, asking if he is very busy right now. The patriarch sharply questions him about the reason for him himself carrying the tray. Instead of sending the servants, Lion laughs in a super friendly way, explaining that he made sure to bring everything personally to please his beloved grandfather. He places the tray on top of the wooden table, explaining that he prepared the special drink and baked cookies for them to eat together. Patrick glares at the beautiful bear-shaped cookies and asks, quite incredulous, if his grandson actually cooked everything alone. The young master confirms with a beautiful smile on his face, saying that he wanted to show his new skills in a fun way. The blonde asks for him to taste without shyness, and the old patriarch holds the cookie with quite a bit of suspicion in his thoughts. The old man takes a bite of the cookie and widens his eyes in complete shock upon feeling the food melt in his mouth. He savors the subtle aroma of sweet potato, thinking that that sweet flavor in just the right measure is a true masterpiece. Lion notices his cooking level rise suddenly and smiles, happy to see that the sweet actually pleased the patriarch. Patrick recovers his firm posture and tells the boy to speak the real reason for the visit, leaving the blonde a bit surprised. The old man says he knows he wants something, and Lion just laughs, admitting that he really cannot deceive his grandfather. The young master looks at the steaming cup and comments that he heard rumors about the coming-of-age ceremony that will occur soon. Lion suggests giving a break from the heavy trainings of Lixil until then, and the old patriarch glares at him, wanting to know the reason for that. The young man gesticulates, explaining that his younger brother's study routine is far too exhausting for a child to bear. He asks to lessen the training so that all the family participates healthy, and the old master stands totally speechless. The grandfather tearfully cries with emotion inside, proud with Lion's maturity, but on the outside tries to maintain his classic serious posture. He gets moved, seeing the fraternal affection between them, and gladdens for seeing that no rivalry exists in the family. The patriarch agrees and promises to give the break to the youngest, but asks with curiosity if his grandson wants only that from him. The old man insists, wanting to know if he has no other special request for the party, and Lion stands totally reactionless. Lion denies, startled, and the old man wonders whom the boy took after to be so detached from material goods and riches. Patrick knows that the grand coming-of-age ceremony in the Empire serves for much more than just performing an ancient rite. The grand custom is to give as a gift whatever rare jewel the birthday person desires to boast the family's wealth. Patrick gets thoughtful upon remembering that his grandson did not demand absolutely anything of material value for that grand date. The old man concludes in a comical and tense way that the young man wants his grandfather to personally choose the grandest gift of all. Lion notices his grandfather's terrifying atmosphere and decides to say goodbye in a rush. Sneaking out of that massive library, Patrick remains in absolute silence, staring at the horizon while the library door closes calmly before him. The powerful old man rests his chin on his hands and begins to plan in silence what he must do to surprise his grandson. While walking happily through the hallways, the young man wonders, confused, what his grandfather meant by that attitude. In his room, Lixil studies tired in the middle of massive piles of documents until he hears an excited voice calling for him. Lion opens the office doors with quite a bit of force, startling the boy and making several sheets fly through all the air. The blonde gives a laugh at the mess of Lixel's office and comments in a fun way that he didn't know his younger brother was so disorganized. The youngest gets red with shame and admits with a lowered head that he preferred that his brother never saw him in that terrible state. The boy asks what brought him there, and Lion offers the tray, revealing with pride that he prepared everything with his own hands. The two sit on the sofa to snack, and little Lixel chooses a bunny-shaped cookie to taste first. He chews the sweet and gets surprised with the wonderful flavor, exclaiming in a very excited way that the cookie is incredible. The youngest praises his skill in the kitchen, and Lion responds modest that cooking tasty dishes is just a regular hobby. The blonde warns that he talked with their grandfather and that he will be able to rest and have a deserved break until the day of the grand ceremony. Lion reveals with a gentle smile that he already got the permission because he became quite worried upon seeing him so exhausted in the trainings. The youngest gets deeply moved with the blonde's attitude and displays a massive smile of gratitude for having such a wonderful brother. Lixel explains that his fatigue has no relation to the studies, and Lion, startled, asks if they are secret love letters. Lion thinks that the youngest has the age to interest himself in girls, but the boy says he worries about his ceremony. The young master understands everything suddenly, upon realizing that his brother is referring to the traditional family rite. He recalls that the ritual consists of crossing a labyrinth in the magical library that guides them to their ideal magic. But forcing the path transforms the place into an eternal labyrinth, and whoever manages to reach the end wins a valuable prize. He thinks super cute Lixel's worry about his lack of mana and guarantees that the ritual is just a mere formality. But the youngest, with his hand on his head, refutes his brother. Explaining that his true worry is with the event clothes, Lion stands completely lost with that unusual response and asks confused what the clothes have that is so special. The youngest asks if he has already seen the outfit that their grandfather designed for the event, and the young master confesses he hasn't seen it yet. Lixel throws the costume design on the table, revealing that the patriarch Patrick possesses a terrible secret weakness there. Their grandfather does not possess any sense of style, and designed a bizarre clown outfit that would ruin his grandson's reputation. Lion guarantees in panic that he will never wear that, and the younger brother totally agrees with the young noble's despair. The two enter into a panic, yelling, and Lixel explains that Patrick only dressed well because Sylvia stopped him all the time. Lion mentally thanks Sylvia's efforts and plans to suggest that all the family use standardized outfits. On the next day at the village, the small orphans spot the young master from afar and run excited to hug the blonde. He delivers a small bag filled with his delicious homemade cookies, leaving the children extremely happy from there. A lady observes him give the sweets, and the young master warns Friendly that he came up to there to ask a special favor. He explains that he would like to find the talented tailor who participated in the volunteer works at the orphanage. The blonde asks to be introduced to the professional, and the woman widens her eyes, quite startled with that request. Lion recalls that he stood extremely impressed upon watching the steps and the legendary skills of that tailor. He remembers that the professional adjusted the fabrics perfectly on the orphans' bodies. Like a true master craftsman, Lion insists that he needs someone with that absurd talent, and the woman says that it is possible, but hesitates a bit from there. The blonde asks if some impediment exists, and she responds in a thoughtful way that he will understand when he gets there. The young man follows the instructions and arrives before a wooden establishment that looks extremely old and finished. He glares at the sign falling to pieces and asks himself with quite a bit of doubt if that is really the correct address. The sign plummets with a lot of noise on the ground, making the young master sweat cold and doubt even more that ugly place. Lion enters the dark shop filled with scary mannequins and thinks it bizarre for such a brilliant tailor to live in that place. The blonde calls for someone in the silence of the environment, and suddenly a man with dark sunglasses emerges whispering in the dark. But in the same instant, the man changes posture and yells euphoric, asking if he is a customer, startling the young man. The tailor notices his traits and asks if he is not the young man he met at the orphanage, leaving Lion awkward there. Lion scratches the back of his neck and confesses that he is the heir of the Asteries, but that he was disguised in the charity for personal reasons. The man smiles in a friendly way, saying he perfectly understands the need for a disguise of a young noble from there. He asks what brought such an important figure up to his humble commerce, and Lion says he seeks an elite tailor. The tailor gets startled and questions intrigued why the powerful and wealthy Asteri family would need his simple services. The professional asks for them not to stay standing and guides them politely to the service room to talk better. The blonde spots legendary trophies on the shelf and recognizes from afar the greatest tailoring prize of all the Grand Empire. The tailor offers the old sofa, and Lion accepts with good grace, sharing his precious small bag of cookies with the man. The man serves an ordinary tea, asking apologies for the quality of the drink, and the generous noble says that there is no problem at all. Lion offers the cookies, revealing that he himself prepared them, and leaves the humble tailor completely surprised with the feat. The man recalls that the delicious breads of the orphanage were also made by the young man and praises his magnificent cooking. The tailor accepts the sweet with much joy and takes a quite generous bite of the bear-shaped cookie to test the flavor. Upon chewing the cookie, the man widens his eyes and lets out a euphoric murmur. Impressed with the simply perfect flavor, he feels the crunchy sweet melt instantly in his mouth and compares the flavor to the purity of an innocent youth of the kingdom. Suddenly, the sensation of the flavor changes in a drastic way in his mouth, resembling a much more intense mystery. He travels in his poetic thoughts, comparing the sweetness to a charming prince declaring his love for a peasant girl. The tailor feels his heart race and thinks moved that the word tasty is too simple for that miracle. With eyes widened from pure emotion and ecstasy, the man yells extremely loud, saying that that cookie is pure art. The professional notices the blonde's mysterious elegance and concludes that nobody is capable of understanding his grandiosity. The man wipes tears of emotion with a fabric tissue, and the young noble asks with a smile if the sweet was good. The tailor states moved that he almost cried and guarantees that savoring that cookie brought an infinite inspiration to him. Moved with the delicious cookies, the tailor Andri promises to respond to all the young master's questions with total honesty. He deduces that the young man came to ask him to make some clothes and guarantees right away that he can do this work. The man guarantees that he masters cutting and sewing better than any other tailor, but soon changes tone in a hesitant way. He fears that wearing his creations might bring shame to the noble family, but Lion asks intrigued the real reason for that. Andri reveals sadly that he is the illegitimate son of a noble family, and Lion notices the prejudice of the kingdom's elite. The man vents that the rumors ruined his luxury clientele, causing almost all the nobles to abandon him gradually. Andri suggests hiding his name in the work, but Lion interrupts him, slamming on the table, and asks to see some of his ready clothes. The tailor warns that only simpler commoners' clothes remained, and Lion responds calmly that he only wants to see his skill. The man opens the curtain, revealing his showcase with a quick movement, and leaves the young blonde heir in absolute shock. Lion stands marveled with the perfection of the pieces while the tailor humbly explains that they are just clothes for neighbors. Lion's system displays several ratings of 2 and 3 stars on the items, leaving the young master very excited from there, faced with such absurd quality in clothes considered basic. The blonde young man can barely contain his massive admiration. He analyzes the perfect ratings of the system and concludes that Andri's techniques are impeccable in all aspects. The young master wonders, excited, how the outfits would be if that professional received top-tier fabrics. Lion announces decided that he wants to wear clothes made by him at the coming-of-age party, startling the tailor with that news. The man fears bringing humiliation to the customer, but Lion guarantees that nobody will dare to criticize and asks only for a firm response. The blonde raises 3 fingers of his hand, indicating that he will need 3 complete and impeccable outfits for the grand day of the party. He glares at the tailor with quite a bit of firmness and asks in a direct way if he really accepts to face that grand challenge. Lion guarantees to assume total responsibility for the event and asks if the man possesses the necessary ambition to accept. The invitation to sew rare fabrics without worrying about finances is simply too tempting for any good tailor. Andri yells, blushed with excitement, telling the young man to give the orders, and Lion celebrates knowing it was an excellent decision. The tailor sits at the table holding a calligraphy quill and asks, super excited, what details the young man will want there. Lion lists complicated demands of unified elegance, and Andri tries to understand the style that the young man in fact wants to create. The man enters into a panic upon discovering that the patriarch Patrick will also wear his clothes and almost doesn't believe what he heard. He repeats that the other nobles despise him intensely, but Lion says with mockery that the royalty's opinion matters nothing. The tailor scratches his head, agreeing that nobody would dare to speak a word against the powerful and influential Astri noble family. The blonde agrees with a corner smile, and the professional begins to note everything, very focused on the details of the new project. With a massive glow in his eyes, the man promises out loud that he will give his absolute best to sew those pieces. The man says that the perfect design already came to mind, and Lion opens a bag with samples. Saying he doesn't understand much about fabrics, Lion shows the old family book, and Andri yells surprised upon recognizing the legendary rare fabrics catalog of the Asteries. With tears in his eyes, the tailor asks permission to open the historic book, and Lion tells him to flip through with all calm. The man passes the pages of golden sheets with extreme care, feeling that he is holding a true divine relic. A golden and magical glow simply emanates from the open pages, leaving the tailor completely dumbfounded on the spot. The catalog reveals incredible fabrics created by elves and rare materials harvested in the furthest parts of the continent. Andrew sees descriptions of fabrics made with the breath of fairies and can barely believe that these legends really exist. Lion asks Fun if he liked something, and Andrew responds euphoric that he is incapable of not liking some fabric from there. But suddenly, the experienced tailor stops on one of the pages and widens his eyes upon coming across a specific sample. Lion asks about the fabric, and Andrew recalls with affection that a young lady adored that material in her golden times. He mentions that the fabric was impossible to find in the ordinary market and laments there being no written information about it. The young master approaches to read the properties, and the virtual system quickly opens before his glowing eyes. Lion reads the item description and realizes that that special fabric with magical protection was made by his own grandfather in the past. The young man deduces that his grandfather created the fabric exclusively for his mother and notices the massive sentimental value of that piece. Decided to use it on the family clothes, Lion asks if it is possible to sew it, and the professional confirms that yes right away. The man prepares to take the noble's body measurements, but is interrupted by rhythmic knocks coming from the shop door. Lixil appears at the shop entrance, warning that he delayed a bit because he was organizing a delivery of special supplies. Lion asks confused about the supplies, and Andrew notices that the street on the outside of the commerce is extremely noisy. The youngest orders that they bring the boxes inside the shop and leaves Lion and the tailor, Andrew in complete shock on the spot. Upon looking to the street, they spot a gigantic line of carriages packed with precious sewing materials for the shop. Lixil comments with quite a bit of naturalness that he came to know of his brother's interest in hiring that tailor's services. He says he will not spare efforts for his beloved older brother's coming-of-age party to be simply perfect. Lixil says with pride that this level of support from his part is something totally natural. Lion asks if Andrew prefers to use his old tools, but the tailor denies at the same time. The tailor yells with joy, asking to change all his old tools immediately. Andrew thanks immensely Lion's patience for having waited during all the measurement of his clothes. The tailor promises to give all of himself to create a masterpiece, and the young master asks him to go with calm. Lion smiles and says he would like to ask a last special favor of the experienced tailor there. The blonde asks if Andrew could teach him sewing and leaves both the brother and the man in shock. The man warns that beginners hurt themselves a lot, but the young master insists that he doesn't mind. That Lion explains that he wants only to learn the basic, and the clothier asks what the reason for this wish would be. The young man says he wants to understand the techniques to manage to actually appreciate the dedication of whoever sews. Andrew gets deeply moved and agrees that each stitch on the clothes really carries an intention. With teary eyes, the tailor guarantees that he will teach absolutely everything he knows to the young noble. He warns that first he is going to measure Lixil and leaves Lion completely free to look at everything in his shop. Time passes calmly while the evening starts to appear on the horizon of that beautiful town. Lion walks alone through the establishment and continues admiring the extreme quality of the clothes there. He examines a simple fabric and wonders how the tailor managed to make something so good with bad material. Holding the pants pattern, the young man fills himself with courage and decides to try to sew that piece on his own account. Without knowing the basic, he thinks it would be cheating to use machines and decides that the best is to start sewing by hand. The blonde remembers that he has a magical sewing kit stored and resolves to grab the item to help in the process. He sits very focused and begins to work excited, knowing that that is the perfect moment to test. In the same instant, the needle begins to glow and changes shape, leaving the young apprentice surprised with the effect. Lion notices that the tool passes the thread by itself and stands fascinated with the functioning of that magical item. The young man takes a deep breath and starts his first practical work, concentrating all his attention on the needle. The sun strikes the window, lighting the noble who works without stopping and exerts himself to give his best in the sewing. After giving a few stitches, he lets out a smile and realizes that doing that is much more fun than he thought. He notices that the activity is quite relaxing and that his movements are getting faster and faster there. Glowing lines appear on the fabric, serving as a guide, and the blonde wonders if that is an effect of the magical kit. Lion thinks everything very easy, and the system shows that his cotton pants piece has already reached 80% collapse. Echo suddenly, startling the young man who didn't even notice that Andrew and his brother had already returned to there. Lixel says he didn't want to interrupt his focus while Andri analyzes Lion's sewing with much surprise. The man examines the fabric very close and says that despite being a bit crooked, the work is excellent for a newbie. Suddenly, the clothier begins to run through the shop in a freak-out, saying he had forgotten something very important. He yells excited that manual sewing is the true foundation of everything and realizes that he was gradually forgetting his origins. The professional enters into his own creative world, and Lion notices that he got overexcited with the new ideas. The blonde brother suggests that they return to the mansion, and the youngest agrees promptly on account of the appointment. He remembers that the two possess a very important dinner scheduled with the powerful family patriarch today. At the castle, the butler warns the Marquis that his two grandsons have just arrived and that they must go to the dining hall. Patrick agrees seriously while finishing signing some important papers at his office desk. The imposing man begins to walk through the luxurious castle hallways, accompanied closely by his servant. The butler comments that it is rare for the three to dine together, and the patriarch responds that sometimes this makes itself necessary. He confesses in a sincere way that he only works so much to manage to protect the future of his beloved grandsons. There, Patrick complains that the royalty makes him work too much, even 50 years after the end of the terrible demon war. The butler jokes, saying that an 8th circle mage lives almost as long as an elfo, and the elderly man changes the subject. The leader states that he could not miss it by any means, now that his direct heirs finally gathered. Patrick enters the dining room, thinking about how his grandson's new, warm attitude changed things lately. He observes the young men at the table and wishes from the bottom of his heart to protect the peace of those treasures that his daughter left. The patriarch decides that he cannot let anyone discover Lion's massive potential, and the blonde greets him happily. The young man comments that the meal is exaggerated and wonders if they needed so much food for an ordinary dinner. Lixel explains with an ironic smile that he made a special request to the chef because it had been a long time since they gathered there. Lion remembers that in the past he only ate bland, sick person foods while his grandfather dined at the palace. Lion realizes that his younger brother Lixel spent all this time eating alone at that gigantic table. The blonde young man feels a tightening in his chest upon thinking how lonely his little brother must have felt. Lion suggests making more meals as a family, and Lixel looks at him deeply touched with this kindness. The Proto notices the weight of the youngest's loneliness and decides that he needs to change things to help him from then onward. He taps lightly on the table, determined to ask his grandfather to reserve more time for them to stay together. Lion mentally promises that his brother will never again need to go through this massive loneliness at the time of meals. In this instant, the patriarch Patrick prepares to sit under the attentive look of his two young grandsons. The grandfather orders that everyone start to eat, and the two young men agree immediately in a quite respectful way. Silence takes over the place while the silverware strikes softly on the meat plates served at the table. The Marquis asks about the progress of a task, and the youngest responds right away that everything is under control. The tense and silent mood makes Lion feel that the family dinner looks like a business meeting. Lion thinks it bad for his grandfather not to ask anything about his health or about the important ceremony that is coming. Lixel notices the heavy mood and decides to intervene, starting a different subject to liven up the table. But it is Lion who breaks the ice, asking by surprise if his grandfather already made some special fabric for his mother. The elderly man takes a sip of his wine a bit uncomfortable and says he has no idea what he is talking about. Lion notices his nervousness and notes that talking about his late mother really leaves him quite bothered. He explains that he met a tailor and ended up finding a very rare fabric sample on the property. The blonde asks for Lixel to confirm if he remembers the glowing material, and the brother agrees, a bit hesitant. The young man mentions that the tailor remembered a young lady from the past who adored that type of material. Lion concludes that that young woman could only be his mother since the fabric was stored in the family castle. Patrick lets out a tired sigh and realizes that it is no longer possible to escape from such a delicate subject. The mention of his late mother was always the most painful and avoided subject by everyone in that luxurious mansion, but the Proto knows that they need to face this pain together if they want to heal the wounds of the past. He decides to use the excuse of the matching clothes to bring the family closer again and open everyone's hearts there. The grandfather finally breaks the silence and admits that his grandson is covered in reason in his assumptions. He solemnly reveals to the young men that he was the creator himself of that very rare fabric in the past. The blonde gets surprised with the revelation and asks what the real reason was for him to have created something like that. The elderly man says there was no great reason beyond his constant worry with his daughter's safety. Patrick remembers when he placed protection magias on each thread of wool just to prevent her from getting hurt. He confesses to being surprised by seeing that such a special material still exists after so many years. Lixil stays in silence, processing the information that his grandfather created that out of pure fatherly love. Patrick realizes that his own grief ended up distancing his grandsons and feels guilty for having left them so alone. Lion guarantees that he will use the fabric in his official outfits, and his grandfather tells him not to worry about the amount the blonde asks when his grandfather will be free to take his measurements, and leaves the elderly man completely surprised. He thought that the clothes would be only for his grandsons, but Lion insists that his grandfather also needs to participate. Lixil suggests calling the tailor to the castle to facilitate his grandfather's schedule, and everyone loves the excellent idea. The patriarch finally gives in with a discreet smile and says he is going to follow his grandson's orders in this matter. Lion celebrates in thought for having gotten his grandfather's permission in such a natural and peaceful way there. He feels very relieved and ready to focus totally on the preparations of his grand party that will come from that day onward. All the preparations for the grand event began to progress without any problem. Thanks to the frequent visits of the tailor, the family's exclusive clothes were turning out impeccable. All the decoration of the massive palace for the ceremony was also being set up within the planned deadline. With the absolute support and dedication of his grandfather and brother, the young man found himself suddenly with nothing more to do there. But the young master decides to enjoy all this free time to focus on something he wanted very much to practice. Lion spends hours sewing to rise in level, but begins to feel that there is something wrong in the process. He continues giving firm and precise stitches on the fabric, thinking that by this point it already should have happened. The blonde waits for the system window warning that he learned the sewing skill, but nothing of a screen appears. He wonders why the talent still hasn't unlocked, even after making a shirt of excellent quality. A terrible and scary doubt begins to appear slowly in the mind of the worried Proto there. Lion enters into complete despair upon asking himself if in reality he simply doesn't have talent for this. He tries to push away those bad thoughts and prefers to believe that he just didn't train for sufficient time. Lion gets confused, trying to understand the difference between learning to cook and the functioning of sewing. Without finding a logical answer for his problem, the young man holds his head and yells out of pure frustration. Suddenly, the maid opens the door and warns that the tailor Andri has just arrived for a quick visit. Lion asks if the clothes are ready, and the servant responds that yes, but says that the man looked half strange. The young man gets confused with her comment and tries to understand the reason for that supposedly worried expression. The maid explains that the professionals seem to carry the weight of something terrible having gone wrong in the production. Lion decides to go immediately to the reception room of the castle to talk and check what happened there. Without losing time, he pushes the grand golden door, anxious to discover what is afflicting the tailor. But as soon as he enters the room, the young blonde heir stands completely speechless with what he sees there. The place was transformed into a true and luxurious sewing shop, filled with clothes hangers and gigantic mirrors. The young man asks himself, astounded, how the man managed to bring all that heavy work structure alone. Lion calls for the tailor with a smile, and the professional celebrates, relieved upon seeing that the master finally arrived. The clothier extends the new impeccable gala outfit and suggests that the young blonde make the first test soon. Lion wears the piece of clothing and stands impressed with the beautiful golden details sewn on his sleeves. Before the mirror, the blonde sees the 3 stars of the system that confirm the massive quality of that masterpiece. Lion notices that Andri is tense, and the man admits that although the result is beautiful, something still bothers him. A message warns that the outfit is incredible, but that it lacks a surprise element to leave it perfect for real. The blonde looks at his own reflection for a few more instants, and suddenly notices exactly what is lacking. He comments that the neck region looks far too empty, and the tailor agrees, excited with this observation. The man explains that the lack of a scarf or of a beautiful tie leaves the visual without a true focus point. Lion understands the point and begins to reflect on which accessories would pair better with each of the outfits. He plans a traditional tie for his grandfather and a younger bow tie model for his younger brother Lixil. In this moment, the professional takes a deep breath and asks a very important favor of the young heir of the house. He surprisingly asks for Lion to give the final touch and do the embroideries on his own family's outfits. The young man widens his eyes and almost doesn't believe the absurd request he has just heard from the tailor's mouth. Andri guarantees that he will teach everything step by step, but Lion continues extremely reluctant with this idea. The young man says it would be disrespect from his part to meddle and alter the perfect work made by a master like him. Lion asks what the reason is for him to want to run this risk, and the tailor prepares to explain himself better. The man reveals that he discovered recently that the ancient lady for whom he sewed was Lion's late mother. He mentions that the powerful patriarch Patrick made sure to thank him, even being just a simple clothier. The professional reveals that in that special moment, he finally understood something very deep and sincere. He noticed that making clothes for loved people means much more than just creating a beautiful design. The man says that as the patriarch placed protection magic on the fabric, the grandson must give the final touch on the pieces. He touches on Lion's chest, saying that the young man can place feelings that no other tailor would manage. Andrew smiles, saying that giving up his own work is not easy, but that the family's affection is worth more. Lion feels deeply motivated with the incentive and promises to exert himself to the maximum to do his best. He accepts the challenge with confidence, and Andrew invites him to sit and start planning the designs. The young blonde sits at the table with a pencil in hand and reveals that in reality, he already has an excellent idea in mind. He shows his designs and explains that he wants to highlight the youngest Lixal as the great and worthy successor of the family. The experienced clothier then asks which type of accessory and design the blonde will want to make for himself. Lion says he will decide that after finishing the others, and Andrew suggests starting by practicing a tie. The man teaches all the complex structure of a tie and explains which areas demand a much greater care. The blonde thinks it funny the names of the parts reminding swords and says laughing not to comment on this close to his grandfather. Lion demonstrates knowing the technical terms of sewing and leaves the teacher quite surprised with his cleverness. The professional explains that the noble silk fabric facilitates the work a lot by holding the eye shape in a firm way. With spirits renewed, the enthusiastic master yells with joy and prepares to give start to the first class. Suddenly, a sound signal from the virtual system is activated and leaves the blonde extremely tense in the same instant. The system shows that the tie made by Lion has visible flaws, and he asks with shame for the master not to lie. The teacher suggests starting the embroidery, and the heir says he wants to draw the official crest of his noble family. Lion begins to draw the crest of connected leaves to symbolize the strong and eternal union of his beloved family. Andrew thinks the meaning very deep and encourages the young blonde to start to embroider with this beautiful thought in mind. The master explains that texture is the most important point in sewing to give a natural and elegant aspect to the pieces. Lion understands that he will need to practice plenty and asks for a 3-day deadline to manage to finish embroidering everything alone. The excited tailor smiles with his hands on his chest and says he fully trusts the potential of his young and dedicated pupil. Lion celebrates for not having pricked his finger, but the system warns that his ordinary tie still possesses a bland embroidery. He spends all the molds left by the instructor and shifts to drawing his own patterns in search of improvements. Out of pure stubbornness, he avoids using the magical repair case so as not to harm the natural evolution of his skills. Exhausted, the young man admits that the work is difficult and feels a desire to give up on account of the constant pricks of the needle. Lion stretches in the chair, complaining of strong pains throughout his body after spending so many hours focused on the sewing. The young blonde looks with quite a bit of seriousness at the clothing pieces arranged on his table and decides to take a deep breath. Lion refuses the idea of giving up on the project and grabs the fabric, noticing that he is finally catching the knack of the rhythm. Suddenly, a mysterious golden glow emanates from his hand upon touching the material, leaving the young man surprised with the phenomenon. The system warns that a new special tailor skill has just awakened, thanks to his relentless effort. Lion celebrates much upon seeing that he finally reached level 1 of apprentice of tailoring in his new specialty. With the new skill, the blonde begins to cut the fabrics with agility, while the system rises to level 2. He passes the iron on the material, releasing money achievements and reaching quickly the 3rd level of expertise. Suddenly, the young master interrupts his work and begins to reflect on the requirements to awaken talents. He analyzes the beautiful leaf embroidery and deduces that the key for the awakening is his strong need for the created item. The young man remembers when he awakened the blacksmith skill just for needing tools for his potions. He recalls also the cooking talent that arose from the lack of oil, but in sewing, he evolved in another way. Lion slams his hands on a notebook determined and concludes that now he needs something specific to continue there. He realizes that it was great not to have used the magical kit before, because now he manages to create great pieces without any help. The system rates the accessory as high quality and warns that its value rose with the craftsman's touch. Super excited for activating the special craftsman effect, the blonde heir prepares to apply the final embroidery. The tie with the crest glows much, and the system elevates it to the maximum category of 3 stars on the virtual panel. The system praises the piece, calling it an unbelievable work of art, while Lion places the accessory on the mannequin. The young man celebrates much upon seeing the two pieces unite and gain one more bonus star by synergy effect. The magnificent 4-star suit glows intensely, guaranteeing imposing presence for whoever wears it at the grand event. Lion stands shocked upon seeing that the gala clothing set possesses several extra magical effects of great utility. He sees that he completed 1/3 of the special sewing challenge and gets excited to make his brother's garments and his own. The blonde tries to contain his strong anxiety and repeats to himself that he needs to work with quite a bit of calm from then onward, with his brother's beautiful bow tie finalized. With success, the system warns that the young heir reached the second stage of the goal. Lion analyzes the ready suits of his grandfather and of Lixil, realizing that the big problem now will be creating his own outfit. The young man reflects, worried about which style of tie he must create for himself to avoid it. Getting repetitive, he has a brilliant idea and decides that the best path will be making a distinguished model with a beautiful jewel. The Proto draws the new accessory in the notebook. Knowing that the jewel positioned right in the center will be the grand highlight, Lion opens the luxurious family chest, considering using some of the rare ancient jewels that belong to his own grandfather among so many glowing options. He focuses his eyes on a magnificent and relucent stone of purple shade in the drawer. The blonde smiles with tenderness upon noticing that the color of that precious stone is identical to the color of his family's striking eyes. He attaches the beautiful adornment onto the dark tie with care and celebrates proud upon seeing that it turned out simply fabulous. The system confirms that he concluded the grand challenge and confers a beautiful prize in coins for his miraculous feat there. The blonde young man gets extremely astounded upon receiving an additional coin bonus, simply unbelievable, from the system. The young man celebrates euphoric upon seeing that the special system coin shop finally was unlocked with his high balance. When he prepares to open the shop, the door is opened with a bang, startling the young man in a sudden way. In the room, Lixil appears furious with a dark aura and complains for seeing that his older brother is still awake sewing there. The youngest warns that he came to know that he turned the latest nights awake, and Lion tries to defend himself, saying he had deadlines. With a scary look, Lixil orders that he go to bed immediately, leaving the young Proto terrified. The maid appears and simply carries the blonde like a bag of potatoes, agreeing that he needs to sleep without fail. The young man cries on the bed, begging to take just a quick little look at the newly unlocked special shop of the system. The grand day finally dawns in the sumptuous palace of the Astery family, with the sun lighting the imposing gates. The attentive maid praises the young man's visual, saying he is incredibly elegant and charming with the new suit. She highlights that the tie paired very well, and Lion smiles, relieved to see that all his dedication was worth it. The young man remembers that even Andri cried from emotion and stood proud upon seeing the result of all that effort. The servant observes her young master with a calm look and a discreet smile of affection in the corner of her lips. She gets emotional upon remembering the fragile young man in the past and notices with affection how much he grew and changed nowadays. Lixil appears in the luxurious hallway and asks in a friendly way if his beloved older brother managed to sleep well. Lion asks if the youngest was waiting for him, and the young man of blue garments confirms with a positive nod of his head. Lixil says with pride that he will make a point to escort the birthday person from then onward to the sumptuous party hall. The massive doors of the hall finally open, revealing the massive golden and magical light that emanates from the event inside there. The party hall is packed with imposing nobles, and Lixil remembers that his brother is the great Proto of that night. An orchestra plays beautiful classic melodies under the massive glow of crystal chandeliers suspended from the hall ceiling. The noble guests whisper, marveled, saying that the grand decoration surpasses even an emperor's banquet. Others gossip, happy about the family relationship, and suppose that the old bad rumors were invented lies. The announcer's voice echoes through the place, warning about the imposing entrance of the Marquis, accompanied by his direct heirs. Patrick enters the enclosure, walking in a solemn way next to Lixil, leaving the nobles commenting about his presence. But the looks soon deflect as soon as they notice the emergence of the true honored person who walks with a smile. Lion appears with a dignified and imposing posture, drawing absolutely all the attention of whoever is present at the event. The young man descends the stairs under a warm round of applause from all the aristocrats who observe him with great respect. Some noblewomen whisper malicious, thinking that Lion doesn't look so majestic and worthy of being the patriarch's successor. The grandfather approaches him, calling his name in public, and the blonde responds promptly, maintaining his due composure. The elderly man whispers, alerting his grandson not to mix with the guests' clothes there, because they are of terrible character and value. Lion asks if the elderly man is worried about him, but Patrick changes the subject, warning that he needs to give a speech soon. The young man laughs quietly and promises that he will bring no shame, knowing that his grandfather cares for real deep down of everything. Walking to the microphone, he thinks that he doesn't want to focus on opportunists, but rather on the main objective of his family. He introduces himself to the public with much class, explaining with good humor that he finally reached his expected adult age under the proud looks of his family members. Lion focuses on transmitting a reliable image to everyone in that place. Lixil listens attentively to his brother's beautiful speech of gratitude and suddenly notices a small, unexpected detail there. The youngest asks himself if his older brother always possessed that air so reliable and impressive in the past. Two noblewomen begin to whisper, admitting that in some way young Lion is drawing much of their attention today. Others agree, commenting that although he looks ordinary, his luxurious garment gives the sensation of being something very special. The guests praise the elegant simplicity of the outfit, which seems to highlight perfectly Lion's noble presence. They try to discover which famous designer made that work of art, but discover that no known designer accepted. Patrick comments in a praise tone that his grandson used his head well, and leaves Lixil quite surprised with that rare speech of his. Lixil asks himself if his brother calculated everything strategically, and his grandfather agrees that he is a very perceptive boy. Lion closes his speech in a brilliant way, thanking everyone for the presents and inviting them to enjoy the grand party. He wishes an excellent night of celebration to everyone under a massive round of applause and cheers from all the presents there. Lixil approaches the young man with eyes glowing from admiration, congratulating him for that excellent announcement. Lion laughs awkwardly and thinks that in reality, that ease for speeches came from his suffered professional experience. The grandfather praises the young man, affirming that their lineage of nobility is strong, even with him not possessing the power of mana or aura. The patriarch finally displays a grand and sincere smile to his grandson, who thanks very moved for that validation. The elderly man invites his two grandsons to finally go enjoy the rich banquet that was prepared for the grand date. Various luxury dishes and sweets are served, while the musicians continue to dictate the happy and festive rhythm of the night. Dining together, the grandfather asks if the blonde already decided which item he will take to the mysterious and dangerous labyrinth ritual. The prota glares at his wine glass, knowing that the chosen item will fully influence what he will manage to obtain. He assesses the ordinary possibilities for mages, but realizes that for his class, the final result is a complete enigma. Lion shakes the wine glass in a thoughtful way, trying to define his strategy of action for the challenge that is to come. The young man finally announces that his main plan is to take one of the exclusive potions that he himself crafted beforehand. The grandfather and the brother look with quite a bit of surprise at him, and the elderly man admits to not having so much certainty about this dangerous choice. He explains that he doesn't possess skills with pure magic, and that his potions are his strongest tools at the moment. Lion thinks that even the best garments were made by Andri, and for this reason needs to take his own best work. The grandfather agrees, saying that it is the correct choice and that the labyrinth will teach him useful knowledges in any way. Patrick glares at the young man fixedly and prepares to ask him a quite important and revealing question. All of a sudden, he asks if his grandson possesses interest in politics or in becoming the official heir, and Lion promptly denies without thinking. Lion gesticulates startled, reinforcing that he doesn't possess the slightest interest in assuming the political control of the powerful family. The blonde affirms that he always had certainty that his younger brother Lixil would be the ideal leader, and leaves the youngest quite moved. Hearing the sincere response of his eldest grandson, the patriarch Patrick turns to Lixil in an extremely serious way there. He asks if Lixil will protect Lion with his own life, and the boy solemnly swears by his family's honor and by his mana. Satisfied with the oaths, the patriarch takes a sip of wine in a peaceful way, leaving the young men a bit confused. The Marquis celebrates mentally for seeing that the complicated family succession problem was resolved in such a quick way. He analyzes that at the moment, the greatest threats to his clan continue being the imperial family and a rival house of swordsmen. The elderly man deduces that the royalty is occupied too, much with their own internal fights to bother his family. For now, Patrick ponders that the true current danger resides in the mysterious and lethal actions of the violent rival house of swordsmen. The rival clan went through a terrible and bloody ritual where a single and strong young woman rebuilt her family with the sword. He thinks their methods brutal and plans to avoid any type of direct contact with that dangerous military organization. Patrick grants permission for his grandson to continue free, and Lion asks, laughing, what would happen if he caused problems. The grandfather says calmly that he can do whatever he wants, but warns that an important condition exists behind all of that. The elderly man warns with a terrible look that he will not forgive his grandson if he gets hurt, and leaves the blonde startled with that threat. Lion promises to take good care of himself to avoid his grandfather's fury, and the elderly man decides to close the conversation, ordering that they eat in peace. Lion glares at the bustling hall from afar, holding his wine glass in an elegant way while savoring the grand victory. He observes his grandfather and brother talking with the noble people from afar and realizes how much that task must be exhausting. A waiter approaches him serving a drink, and the prota remembers that he also possesses his own goals there. He smiles, focused, and in the same instant, a young noblewoman boards him in a gentle way, calling his name with curiosity. The lady asks who created that beautiful clothing, and Lion celebrates internally for finally finding his first customer. Other girls join the conversation excited and ask to discover who the talented tailor of the enigmatic outfit is. Lion stands astounded upon seeing so many people interested and asks himself if that is the effect of his beautiful 4-star suit. But suddenly the first young woman expresses a subtle worry, leaving the blonde a bit curious about her comment. She comments in a shy way that she heard rumors that the creator of the clothing had been cast out of the nobility, leaving the young man tense. Other aristocrats comment that some supporters of the first prince usually give much attention to gossips of this type. Lion realizes that Andri became a target of talk on account of the political disputes that happen inside the imperial palace. He asks if this would cause discomfort, but the ladies say laughing that they are interested only in the extreme quality of the clothing. The blonde smiles, satisfied with the massive interest, and resolves to reveal the identity of the grand creator of those garments. Lion reveals Andri's name, and the young woman celebrates happily upon discovering that the legendary tailor is under his tutelage. He fakes that few spots remain in the clothier's schedule and makes the ladies enter into despair to book a time there. But suddenly a cold and imposing female voice orders that everyone wait, leaving the area in complete silence. The mysterious young woman of silvery hair walks decided in Lion's direction, drawing all the attention to herself at the place Clarentia. The feared leader of the powerful house of swordsmen asks in a direct way if the tailor accepts any request. Lion agrees in a quite courteous manner, while the other nobles whisper curious about what she will solicit there. The blonde celebrates mentally her interest and asks with politeness what the desired garment style would be. To everyone's surprise, the young leader requests comfortable training clothes and suitable outfits for her military daily life. The noblewomen around enter into immediate panic with the training clothes request made by that feared and deadly warrior. She glares at Lion with an intimidating look and explains in a dark way that her old garments simply were destroyed. Startled with the girl's murderous aura, the other guests invent hurried excuses and flee running from the place. The hall gets completely empty around Lion and Clarentia, leaving the two alone in a quite comical silence. He understands the public's fear from her fame, but decides to focus on the professional side and treat the young woman as his customer. Lion activates his salesman mode and announces smiling that the deadline will be long, but the girl accepts without minding that she agrees in a calm manner and decides that they will settle all the financial details right after the ending of the event. Lion celebrates in thought for closing that excellent business in such an easy way and already prepares himself for the next step. He announces in a mockery tone that all Andri's spots finished, opening space for a long and disputed waiting list. In a genius way, the blonde heir manages to promote Andri's work and consolidates a massive clientele for his ally. The blonde glares at the massive book he prepared with so much care, hoping that the item also gladdens Plenty the tailor. The servant warns that the patriarch announced the start of the ritual, and Lion agrees, holding his precious work for the journey. He positions himself in an imposing way before the massive black gate of the labyrinth, awaiting the moment of his entrance. The arrogant imperial heir approaches the young man, praising the Asteri clan for its massive fame in dealing with magical arts. The first prince, Terrace, asks if he is nervous, while the second prince, Kyle, only observes the scene quiet. Lion knows that the question was a provocation about his lack of magic, but responds in a quite calm and ironic way. Lixil interferes in a protective way in the conversation and firmly questions the reason for his brother to feel nervous there. Lion notices the massive fury of the youngest and thinks it funny how he looks like the strict grandfather when he decides to protect someone. The heir decides to return to his seat, feeling the strong and dangerous magical pressure that emanates from the younger heir. Lixil delivers the requested potion to the blonde and asks with quite a bit of worry for him to have much care inside there. Lion adjusts the strap of his bag with determination and focuses on the gate, ready to give start to his challenging trial. The blonde recalls with nostalgia when he used the massive library as a refuge in his childhood for not possessing talents. He asks himself what valuable treasure the first patriarch of the dynasty would have left stored in that legendary labyrinth. The heir accepts the artifact brought by the servant and concludes that that must be a very valuable object in the game context. The young man makes a small cut on his finger using the blade and lets a single drop of his blood seal the start of the ritual. A powerful magic circle of glowing blue coloration activates under his feet, revealing an absurd amount of energy. The strong tremor generated by the gate opening deeply startles the princes, who watch everything with much worry. Before all the court, the grand passage finally opens, emanating an intense, luminous, and mysterious smoke through the hall. The young blonde is wrapped suddenly by a strong and uncontrollable magical wind current that pulls him inside. He is swallowed by the massive whirlwind of glowing lights, disappearing for complete before the apprehensive eyes of everyone. The system explains that although the labyrinth can be beaten without tests, greed or damage will turn it into a deadly dungeon. But something goes terribly out of control, and the massive crystal structure of the ceiling begins to plummet in a scary way. The noble guests enter into panic, yelling and trying to defend themselves from the dangerous destruction that starts through the enclosure. From the inside side, the blonde feels that things should not happen in that chaotic way and tries to hold himself as he can. The Prota stands very surprised with the massive fury of the winds and realizes that a very dangerous situation just started. The strong whirlwind intensifies, pulling the air deeper and deeper into the enigmatic darkness of that dangerous dungeon. From the outside side, the youngest Lixil and the grandfather run desperate in the direction of the gate, fearing for the safety of the young blonde master. A system notification arises on the virtual panel, informing that an important achievement in the labyrinth was unlocked. He gains additional intelligence, and the system warns that a mana circle of extreme purity just was formed in the blonde. In the hall, the debris begins to hit the ground, spreading panic and causing the ladies to scream desperate on the sight. Wine glasses break through the carpet while the people run, startled, seeking shelter or clamoring for the marquise's help. The massive and heavy iron main chandelier begins to detach from the ceiling and threatens to crush the guests right below it. Clarentia looks upward, very startled, realizing the massive structure falling quickly in her direction in the middle of the room. But a massive barrier of golden energy activates in the last second, preventing that the heavy structure hits the people. The aristocrats celebrate, relieved upon realizing that they were saved by the protection barrier of the imposing Lord Patrick. The powerful defensive power of the Marquis glows through all the imperial palace, guaranteeing the physical integrity of everyone there. Patrick maintains himself in a firm and concentrated posture, commanding the powerful magical shield with extreme precision and energy. The leader orders that the Knight Rixen help in the immediate evacuation of all the guests to a safe area of the castle. Lixil appears running desperate with a countenance of panic, seeking news about what really happened at the portal. The grandfather explains, worried that the library dungeon lost total control and that he already sent orders for everyone's safety. Patrick asks with seriousness about the state of the young imperial heirs who were accompanying the grand ceremony. Lixil reveals that he already conjured defensive shields around all the princes, guaranteeing their total physical integrity. The patriarch joins the group in the middle of the debris and says himself relieved to notice that the important guests are fine. He orders the younger grandson to summon the healers to care for eventual wounded and prepare a rest area. Patrick warns that he will watch the dangerous gate personally, and Lixil reacts in shock with that risky decision of his grandfather. The youngest insists on remaining by his side, claiming it to be far too dangerous. But the patriarch denies at the same time with firmness. The patriarch glares at his grandson, reminding him that he must comply with his obligations as the future official leader of his family. The princes alert about the extreme danger, but Patrick ironizes in a confident way, laughing at their unusual worry. The elderly man orders once more that Lixil leave the place, and the young man glares at the ground, feeling quite reluctant to go away. Kyle tries to calm the youngest, guaranteeing that Lion will be fine while everyone withdraws, remaining only the strong Patrick there. Lixil stays extremely worried and whispers his older brother's name while being forced to distance himself from there. He follows in the direction of the exit, accompanied by the imperial princes while the place continues collapsing gradually. Patrick observes the destruction, worried with the instability of the labyrinth and fearing for the safety of his beloved grandsons. A mysterious person approaches him, walking calmly among the debris, and questions the reason for him still being there. Clarentia, the feared leader of the House Videntis, appears imposing before the Marquis and asks why he didn't evacuate the place. The young warrior comments that the Marquis seems to have absolute certainty that his grandson Lion continues alive inside there. She glares at him in an enigmatic way, suggesting that the patriarch already knows perfectly well how all that situation will end. The elderly man stands quite surprised when Clarentia offers herself in a direct way to help him in the containment of the labyrinth. Patrick questions the reason for that unusual help, knowing that the ruin of his family would bring grand advantages for the rival one. Clarentia responds that she ordered clothes with his tailor and that she detests when her plans are ruined like this. She warns that she will remain close by to give the necessary support while Patrick resolves the situation with his portal. Suddenly, the mysterious maid Elvia re-emerges from the shadows, wrapped in a powerful and scary purple magical aura. The servant smiles from the corner and comments that Clarentia possesses an impressive perception, and Patrick fully agrees with her. Patrick orders that Elvia create a magical barrier around all the labyrinth, and she promptly accepts his command. The elderly man emphasizes with seriousness that absolutely no information about the incident can leak to the outside of the castle with a magical watch in hands. The patriarch plans to start the immediate restoration of all the outer area of the labyrinth. He hopes that with this, he manages to create at least a safe magical rift to allow his grandson Lion to escape from there. Meanwhile, in a sunny scenery filled with colorful flowers, someone hums happily in a casual way. A beautiful blue butterfly lands close to the young blonde, who continues lying lazily in the middle of the beautiful vegetation. There, Lion realizes that a special achievement of the book labyrinth was unlocked, indicating that he overcame the challenge. The young man lies on his back on the grass, confused for having completed the dungeon without even understanding what he did to achieve this. He sits and tries to recall with quite a bit of effort how this same event functioned in the original mechanics of the game. The blonde deduces that he is in the rewards collection area and that the place must be completely safe after the conclusion. The young man asks himself how he should collect the prize, since in the game it was enough to click on a virtual yes button on his screen. He reflects that the original Lion entered and left there without problems and considers if the current change has to do with his mana. Lion thinks that the mana theory doesn't make sense, because if it were only that, his strong grandfather would have easily grabbed the treasure. Suddenly, a new hypothesis arises in his mind, and he asks himself if the secret has to do with his own soul in the body. The heir remembers that his grandfather stored the treasure there after fighting in the ancient war against the demons 50 years ago. He recalls the legendary hero who simply vanished without leaving traces after the end of the conflict and stays thoughtful with this. The young man theorizes if the place didn't recognize him as Lion, but rather as another person since the dungeon resolved itself alone. He ponders that the game player assumes the role of the legendary hero who combated the demon forces in the distant past. Lion stands startled upon realizing that if his grandfather's treasure belonged to the hero, that could be the equipment of his own account. Lion concludes that the labyrinth takes place in the era of the war against the demons where the game users became heroes. The blonde realizes that the treasure stored by his grandfather in reality belonged to the hero of his own account in the game. With this, everything shifts to making sense for the young man, who now understands the reason for the system to recover that item. Lion knows that he cannot stay there forever and decides to find a physical exit due to possessing little active mana. He begins to walk through the beautiful, colorful field, confident that a way to escape exists even at his level. Suddenly, the young man ends up stepping on one of the delicate white flowers and lets out a whisper of doubt on the spot. He notices that the rare white flowers do not grow close to other colors and notices a specific pattern in the soil. Upon looking around, Lion realizes that all the map possesses a well-planned arrangement with different types of plants. The young heir ponders that the mixture of species that should be separate indicates something very suspicious. Lion concludes that that beautiful area was subdivided on purpose and that the plants were cultivated artificially. He deduces that the place with the most bizarre arrangement and out of the rules must hide the grand key for his escape. The blonde finally finds a point where flowers of rival species are growing together in a mysterious way. To unveil the mystery, he closes his eyes and concentrates deeply on the beat of his own heart. The young man focuses his consciousness on the internal flow and visualizes with fascination his mana circle glowing in blue. A system screen arises, confirming that the mana circle was recognized and is ready to be analyzed. Lion concentrates to make all that hidden magical energy become visible before his eyes. A new message warns that the use of mana is going to enhance his special eye skill for a limited time. Upon opening his eyes, he sees several red magical traps floating over the grass and gets startled with the danger. He notes that any movement in false there can activate dangerous spells and that the treasure is not close by. Even before so many magical threats, the blonde displays a confident smile and decides that he needs to advance more. Lion continues walking with extreme caution through the colorful field under the reluctant glow of the magical energy. However, upon taking one more step, he ends up activating a mysterious panel that begins to glitch in a strange way. The system notifies that his skill revealed the real name of the area, and the blonde celebrates for finally finding it. He crouches and focuses on the bluish illusory mana source, asking himself if he will need to dig to get the item. Knowing that he needs a tool to cut the mana, he decides to take a quick look at the coin shop due to possessing sufficient funds. The shop unlocks all the items and shows that his current purchase tier is Bronze. Lion gets very excited upon noticing that an unprecedented survival tab was opened when he most needed it. However, the young man comes across absurd objects and bizarre prices, asking himself if that shop is nothing but a scam. He complains about the useless options and wishes that a way existed to filter only the items accessible to his pocket. For his massive surprise, the system panel responds to his wish and asks if he wishes to apply a filter. Lion requests to see only cheap products and with discounts applied, starting immediately a quick search. The updated list shows magical ingredients and monster rations that do not serve for his current problem. Among the few decent options, he finds an expensive magic detector and sharp scissors with a massive discount. The detector is too expensive, so the blonde decides that the cheap scissors are the only viable choice for the moment. Without thinking twice, the prota presses the virtual button on the screen to confirm the purchase of the tool. He holds the glowing scissors, but suffers upon seeing his savings vanish in such a quick way in the system. The young man admires the object in his hands, relieved for it being linked to his soul in a permanent manner. With the tool in hands, the youth prepares with determination to cut the magical energy source of the place. He pulls a small shovel and mentally thanks for having trained so many digging skills in the past. The blonde begins to dig the earth with extreme agility in search of the mysterious reward buried under the flowers. A warning in red arises on the screen, alerting that only 1 minute of bonus remains for his enhanced vision. Lion gets startled upon seeing that the time passed so fast and tries to speed up the work before the effect ends. Suddenly, his tool hits something solid in the soil, and he celebrates relieved upon finding the hidden object. The young man begins to dig even faster, throwing the dirt to the sides in a desperate race against time. Lion finally removes a beautiful blue chest from the ground and smiles upon noticing that it is identical to the classic game prize. Lacking 10 seconds for the end of the bonus, he wields his magical scissors, ready to cut the mana threads. The young blonde performs a certain cut, cutting the bluish energy chains that sealed the valuable chest. The chest glows intensely, and Lion celebrates enthusiastic the success of his mission at the exact moment the bonus expires. The system screen asks if he would like to claim the reward, and he accepts immediately with much joy. The item is stored in the inventory, and Lion gets happy upon confirming that the treasure really belonged to his old account. A message arises announcing the automatic start of a mandatory story mode that cannot be avoided. Lion enters into total panic without understanding what this story mode is and what is going to happen to him now. Meanwhile, on the outside side of the labyrinth, the patriarch Patrick and young Lixel gather in the grand main hall. Patrick asks about the containment of the damages, and the youngest warns that he disguised all the incident as an earthquake. Lixel adds that he managed the support of the princes and of the Videntis family to avoid the leak of rumors there. The patriarch stands relieved for not having rumors and thinks that the first prince's incompetence helped in this situation. He reports that he acted fast to hide the clues, preventing that the temple or the underworld discover Lion's whereabouts. Patrick praises his grandson's good work and reinforces in thought that these two factions can never know of the truth. The system reveals that the Archbishop of the Temple investigates in an obsessive way everything that relates to the ancient hero. As for the underworld, it was founded by allies of the hero and became one of the greatest secret powers of all the continent. If they do not take care, these intelligence forces can notice that Lion awakened a very special skill. The great secret behind all this worry is that the young heir possesses some strong connection with the hero. The first proof was the potion, and the second is the chaos generated by his entrance into the labyrinth where the treasure was stored. It stands clear for the patriarch that a deep mystery exists about the young man that not even the blonde himself understands. Yet he affirms that the truth must continue hidden, and suddenly a tremor interrupts the conversation of the two in the hall. The massive gate begins to shake intensely, indicating that the labyrinth structure is moving in a chaotic way. Patrick orders that everyone prepare for the worst, while Lixel feels a gigantic energy coming from the inside side. A glowing spiral of purple power arises in the middle of the passage, indicating that something is about to leave the dungeon. In a surprising way, a small piece of paper flies from the portal and hits the patriarch's face with much force. The youngest collects the trembling paper while Patrick stays in complete silence and visibly irritated with the situation. Lixil glares at the mysterious note folded in his hands, realizing it to be a message coming from the interior of the portal. With trembling hands, the young man begins to unfold the mysterious paper. Anxious to discover the content of the message, he notices that the letter was written in a rush, but recognizes Lion's handwriting without any sign of blood or danger. The elderly man asks with quite a bit of anxiety and worry about what in fact is written on that small note. Lixil gulps dry, visibly tense, and prepares to reveal to his grandfather the words left by his older brother. Meanwhile, Lion's consciousness is transported, and the system confirms the start of the playback of the story mode. The blonde wakes up seated on the ground, feeling a strong headache, and realizes that the memories began to be prepared. He observes the recording of an ancient conversation in the dark, deducing that he is watching a memory of the past. A mysterious figure smiles from the corner and asks for Patrick to take care of the chest because the object will not be necessary anymore. The young man stands in shock upon realizing that that is the memory of the day. On his grandfather received the treasure from the hero's hands, Lion tries to focus on the whispers, but gets irritated for not listening straight. The details, and for having created his avatar on random, the young Patrick accepts the mission in the memory and promises to protect the mysterious metallic chest with all his loyalty. A laugh echoes in the dark, and the system panel warns that the viewing of the memory finished and the story mode ended. Back in the library in ruins, the young man stays rather confused with the abrupt end of that mysterious projection. He complains for having received very few relevant informations, even knowing that that was a crucial scene. The heir deduces that the conversation occurred in the war, and that the artifact was delivered to his grandfather to be used in the future. Lion opens the chest and finds silver jewels that serve to hide completely all the user's data and power. He remembers that the item was common in the game and much used to gain experience bonus in a quite simple way. The blonde places the bracelet, relieved for managing to hide his magical power at the moment he most needed. A new system window arises, asking if he would like to analyze the details of his own mana circle. He accepts and gets confused upon noticing that his unique circle is gigantic and capable of storing a massive amount of mana. The young man reflects that the other mages need to meditate much to expand the capacity upon reaching superior levels. Seated on the ground, he questions himself, surprised about the reason for his first circle reserve to be so disproportionate. In the end of the day, Lion decides not to complain of his luck and accepts with joy this grand advantage in his body. The blonde celebrates the success of his mission and celebrates for having conquered a legendary artifact that will help him not to be caught. However, the young man sighs, worried upon remembering that he still possesses a great pending question to resolve there. He looks around, observing the massive destroyed library, and remembers that he still continues trapped in the interior of the labyrinth. The blonde decides to walk through the ruins to try to find a safe escape route up to the exit of that dungeon. But several notifications arise, warning that the access is blocked without the permission of the current master, who is Lion himself. He stands shocked upon discovering his new title and realizes that assuming the control of the place was not in his plans. The system informs that the labyrinth entrance is broken, but offers the option to return to the final area of the dungeon. Lion stands terrified upon imagining the tremendous scolding he is going to take from his grandfather for having caused all that destruction. Suddenly, the young man calms down and realizes that for having turned the master, he also must possess the control to fix everything. The panel asks if he wants to reset the labyrinth, but he refuses upon knowing that he would lose all the items he conquered. Upon seeking another alternative, the system suggests that he make a manual adjustment and start the slow restoration of the entrance. He compares the process with the editing of a save file and decides to revert the state of the place to 1 week ago. Lion asks how much time this restoration process will take, and the panel warns that he won't be able to leave in this period. The blonde enters into despair upon seeing that the repair is going to take more than 600 hours, which equals a whole month. The young man asks if he can walk freely through the library in this time, and the system confirms that he has total access. He discovers a correspondence tube and decides to send a short message to reassure his family. With a mischievous smile on his face, the Proto adjusts his bag and prepares to give start to the long repairs. Lion gives the command of start, and a gigantic green magic circle activates in the hall, giving start to the reconstruction of the area. Various books and shelves begin to float through the space, organizing themselves alone through the powerful magical energy. While everything fixes itself, the blonde requests to be transported to the final and safest area of the labyrinth. A circular portal opens, and the air crosses the light passage, falling on his feet on a beautiful sunny lawn. Lion reflects that he needs to find a way to survive there for a whole month, when suddenly he spots something ahead. The blonde stands very surprised upon coming across a massive and crystalline lake in the middle of that beautiful hidden scenery. He goes up to the shore and admires the water, relieved upon noticing that the beautiful place doesn't seem to present any danger. The system sends a very complex scientific description about the lake fauna, and the blonde asks for a simple explanation. The panel warns that the lake is packed with edible fish of various levels, including a very rare creature. An achievements notification activates informing that the fishing in the lake was officially released for the new master. The blonde notices that he has no fishing rod with him, but soon remembers his great coin shop. He throws the line in the water and stays humming happily while observing his bobber float calmly in the blue water. Comfortably seated on a chair, the heir thanks for having bought the complete fishing kit in the system shop. He fishes a few carps and stays relieved for not needing to eat his own baits to survive on the site. Lion relaxes on the site knowing that at least he is not going to go through any hunger during his isolation period. Suddenly his bobber is pulled sharply downward of the water all at once, deeply startling the young fisherman. He holds the rod and realizes that the weight of that creature is very different from everything he already fished before. The young man stands very impressed with the massive force that the mysterious fish is making to try to escape from his line. The line stretches to the maximum, and the young man realizes that he caught a giant fish. Needing to pull the animal with much care, he exerts himself to maintain the balance, knowing that he cannot rush, so as not to run the risk of losing the fish. With a strong pull, the blonde removes from the water a giant purple fish, and the system congratulates him for capturing a legendary carp. He holds the animal that thrashes and stands, marveled with the energy benefits that special meat offers. The Proto stands extremely excited with the experience and understands perfectly the reason. For people loving to fish, the system warns that he understood the spirit of fishing and awakened a new talent of apprentice fisherman level 1. He stores the fish excited for dinner, knowing that nutritious meat is ideal for his current fragile body. Lion looks around and decides that his first step on the site must be organizing a good area to manage to cook. He uses the shop and buys a folding table, pots, condiments, knives, and all the equipment for his kitchen. The young man sets up the camp, happy for having these items, and decides to grab his alchemy equipment too. Upon opening his virtual bag, he notices a small glowing black stone that he didn't remember having placed inside there. Lion notices that he won a magical flint as a freebie, ideal to light campfires in a much simpler way. With a strike, he uses the flint and creates an intense flame, lighting the campfire quickly at the camp. He admires the fire under the evening sky, feeling a very pleasant sensation of comfort in that beautiful place. The blonde rolls up his sleeves and positions himself at the table, ready to start cleaning his freshly fished carp. He begins to cut the fish, thinking that making a rustic roast is the best way to eat in the open air there. Upon removing the innards, the system warns that the carp's entrails serve as a great alchemy ingredient. Lion smiles upon reading the recipe, realizing that he can use the fish entrails to create potions in his cauldron. Without losing time, the youth throws the nutritious entrails of the animal directly inside his small alchemy cauldron. The pot begins to boil alone upon receiving the material, leaving the blonde enchanted with the system practicality. He places pieces of fish on wooden skewers. Thinking about how any food gets more flavorful this way, Lion skewers the fish with the heads pointed downward to make the excess oil drain from the food. He explains that this way the fish meat gets incredibly crunchy on the outside and very soft on the inside. The young man leaves the skewers organized around the grand campfire and celebrates for concluding the preparation of the roast. While the food roasts, he looks around and decides to use the free time to organize his sleeping place. The blonde cleans the ground, taking the stones from the path, finding the manual work a bit of trouble to do. He sets up a tent and reflects that the extra effort is worth it to guarantee the romantic camping mood. Upon finishing, he glares at his temporary new home under the beautiful starry sky and gets quite satisfied with the result. The delicious aroma of the roast begins to spread through the air, and the heir realizes that the fish is already at the ideal point. Lion removes the golden fish from the skewer with much water in mouth, anxious to take his first bite of the meal. A description screen arises indicating that eating that special carp guarantees fullness and additional benefits. He notices a warning that the food cannot be taken to the outside, indicating that he must savor everything inside there indeed. Without losing time, the young man takes a big bite of the roasted fish and lets out a whisper of pure satisfaction on the spot. Lion adores the crunchy skin of the fish and gets surprised upon noticing that the meat on the inside is extremely soft and juicy. Beyond this, he delights himself with the spectacular smoky aroma of the roast that stimulates even more his appetite to eat. The flavor is so incredible that the blonde cries from emotion, wishing to place the fish on top of a warm rice bowl. He devours the food, happy upon noticing that the carp does not have small bones and wishes to share the flavor with someone. Suddenly, a message warns that the consumption of the carp increased in a permanent way, the maximum limit of his mana. The young man sees his own magic circle expand before him and stands completely reactionless with that discovery. He stands shocked upon realizing that his magical energy reserve increased just because he consumed a meal. The blonde thinks that if the mages from outside knew this, they would empty the lake, and decides to save a bit for Lixil. The prota stores the idea with affection, decided to take some of those special carps to his younger brother. In sequence, he approaches the alchemy cauldron. Anxious to check the result of his boiling mixture, he removes from the pot a glowing pearl called Essence of the Labyrinth Carp that increases his mana recovery. The blonde stands marveled upon noticing that the object is of expert level, deducing that its effect must be massive. He glares at the reluctant magical jewel in his hands and displays a massive ambitious smile upon planning his next steps. However, his curiosity is contained, and he decides to store the artifact in his inventory to analyze with more calm. The heir remembers that he was collecting several wild herbs in the forest and possesses a great variety in his stock. He notes that the labyrinth is packed with plants rich in mana, and with nobody close by to disrupt his gathering, Lion displays a victorious expression and concludes that, technically speaking, that mysterious place became something incredible. He notes that the dungeon now functions as his exclusive area to gain much experience and evolve fast. Happy, the young man rubs his hands, anxious to loot and use each valuable resource that labyrinth offers. But before starting the harvest, Lion decides that the important now is to finish eating his roasted fish. Several days pass in the isolation, and the blonde celebrates happily upon managing to capture 3 giant lobsters from the lake. The young man displays a massive smile holding the fishing net and asks himself if he is being lucky in his daily fishings. Lion stores the lobster in the inventory and plans to make a delicious soup using the flour that remained in his bag. He walks barefoot through the soft grass, feeling himself more and more used to that pleasant wild life of camping. The young man collects the fishing traps and later goes to check if the plants he cultivated are growing well. He analyzes the leaves and notes happy that the exotic sweet potatoes he planted are healthy and developing fast. Satisfied with his vegetable garden, the heir decides to focus his day on the gathering of new materials in the forest. The harvest yields great spices, flavorful mushrooms, and rare flowers that are cataloged with precision by the system. Upon gathering golden daisies, Lion gets enchanted with the beauty of the flowers, and the panel reveals their properties. He thinks about planting some of them around the camp, but suddenly comes across a detail on the system screen. Lion widens his eyes in shock upon noticing that the sale price of that apparently ordinary flower is 300 coins. The blonde stands surprised and excited upon realizing that he can sell the labyrinth flowers to manage to get much money.